Elon Musk sat back in his chair, staring at the screen in front of him. The soft glow of the monitor illuminated his face as his eyes skimmed over the words. It wasn't an email he had been expecting. In fact, it was something he couldn't have possibly prepared for. "Mr. Musk, I challenge you to a battle of minds," the message began. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether he should even finish reading. The sender's name was Lucas Hunter, a 6-year-old child prodigy from California. The email went on, "I believe you are one of the few people whose intellect can match mine. If you accept, I will present you with a series of challenges that will push your mind to its limits. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" Elon blinked, rereading the last part again. A 6-year-old? With a challenge to him? At first, it seemed like a prank, some kind of viral marketing stunt, or perhaps a bored parent writing to get attention. But then he noticed something strange. The email contained no fluff, no desperate pleas for attention. It was clean, concise, and oddly professional. The content was a list of complex problems and questions related to physics, artificial intelligence, and ethical dilemmas, written with a level of precision that Elon found unsettling. He leaned forward, his interest piqued. He knew the world was full of talented individuals, but a 6-year-old with an IQ of 240? That was something he had never heard of. The email continued, "If you accept, I will give you the opportunity to engage with me in an intellectual duel. The first to solve each challenge wins. The prize? A chance to reshape the future." Elon felt the familiar surge of excitement. The urge to take on something difficult, something that would push the boundaries of what was possible, was a feeling he knew well. But this? A child? He ran a hand through his hair, still processing the audacity of it all. Could this be real? Could a 6-year-old really pose a threat to his intellectual legacy? Or was it just another fluke that happened to land in his inbox? He quickly typed a response, "I accept. Let's see what you've got, Lucas Hunter. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" The next morning, Elon was at SpaceX headquarters, pacing in his office. The challenge with Lucas Hunter wasn't just a passing curiosity anymore. It was real. The media had already gotten wind of the story, and his inbox was filling up with questions, articles, and endless debates about whether or not he was crazy to engage with a child. His thoughts kept returning to Lucas, this strange, intelligent, and almost mythical figure who had dared to call him out. Elon knew what it felt like to be underestimated, but a 6-year-old with an IQ that high? That was something new. He leaned over his desk, staring at a picture of his 5 children, each of them growing up in an age of unprecedented technological advancement. What would they think of this challenge? Would they be in awe of a child who could outsmart their father? Or would they see Lucas as a symbol of what the future was becoming? Something that no one could predict? As Elon prepared to meet Lucas, the questions kept swirling. He had no idea what was about to happen, but one thing was certain. This would be a meeting that would change everything. Lucas Hunter was no ordinary child. At 6 years old, he had already surpassed the intellectual abilities of adults far older than him. His parents, who were both well-respected scientists in their own right, had noticed his brilliance at a very young age. By the time he was 3, Lucas could solve advanced calculus problems with ease. By 4, he was reading philosophy books that most university professors would struggle to comprehend. By 5, he had designed a rudimentary AI that could play chess better than the world champion. What made Lucas different wasn't just his IQ. It was his intuition, his ability to connect seemingly unrelated ideas, and his vision of the world. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. He could anticipate outcomes with a clarity that shocked even the most seasoned experts in his field. His parents had tried their best to shield him from the limelight, but it was impossible. The media had caught wind of Lucas's extraordinary abilities, and soon, he was an international sensation. Yet despite the fame, Lucas remained relatively unaffected. He didn't care about the accolades or the recognition. His only focus was on finding new challenges, new problems to solve. And when he discovered Elon Musk, someone who, in Lucas's view, had the potential to shape humanity's future. He felt the irresistible urge to challenge him. The email he sent to Musk was not just a test of intellect, but a test of vision. Lucas believed that Elon had the power to change the world. But Lucas also believed that he could see a clearer path than anyone else. It wasn't about ego. It was about the future. Elon's heart raced as he approached the private meeting room at SpaceX headquarters. The room was stark and minimalist, much like the rest of his workspace. He was greeted by an assistant who led him through a quiet hallway, their footsteps echoing off the high-tech walls. The door to the meeting room opened, and there, sitting at a small table, was Lucas. He looked almost out of place in the futuristic environment. The young boy was dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans, but his eyes, those eyes, were full of intensity. There was something about him that immediately made Elon feel both awed and unnerved. "Mr. Musk," Lucas said, his voice calm and deliberate, "I'm glad you accepted my challenge. I've been looking forward to this." Elon took a seat across from him, trying to shake off the feeling of being in the presence of someone who might be more than human. "I wasn't sure what to expect," Elon replied, his voice betraying a hint of amusement. "I assumed this would be some sort of joke. But now that I'm here, I'm curious to see what you've got." Lucas smiled, though it wasn't a smile of childish glee. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. "Let's begin then," Lucas said, pulling out a tablet from his bag and swiping it open. On the screen, an intricate puzzle appeared. This first challenge is based on the concept of dark matter and its effect on the expansion of the universe. You'll have 1 hour to solve it. Elon raised an eyebrow. This was real, very real. For the first time in years, a sense of excitement and challenge coursed through him. He wasn't just facing another billionaire or another scientist. He was facing someone who could change the very way he saw the world. And for once, Elon Musk wasn't sure if he would win. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of machinery outside. Elon leaned over the puzzle Lucas had presented to him, his brow furrowing in concentration. The problem was complex, no doubt, but as he started jotting down equations and calculations, his mind wandered. Who was this child, really? What drove a 6-year-old to challenge one of the most well-known innovators of the modern world? Elon had faced challenges from brilliant minds before. Physicists, engineers, tech moguls, but none of them had been so young. It didn't make sense. How could someone so young possess the kind of intellectual power that rivaled some of the best minds in the world? As he pondered this, his thoughts began to drift back to the puzzle in front of him. Lucas had already shown his brilliance by selecting a topic far beyond what most people could grasp. The subject matter, dark matter, the mysterious force responsible for the majority of the universe's mass, was an area Musk himself had only explored briefly. It was a fitting challenge, then, but it was also a test. Was Lucas just incredibly gifted, or was there something deeper, something more? Elon took a deep breath, setting the puzzle aside for a moment. He needed to know more about this kid, this prodigy who had somehow, effortlessly, landed a blow to his ego. The boy had been so confident, so calm, even as he sat across from Musk, not as a child, but as an equal. He didn't appear nervous or starstruck. There was no awe in his eyes, only a quiet intensity. It was as if he'd known, all along, that this moment was inevitable. Elon called his assistant, Emma, into the room. "Do me a favor," he said, his voice unusually soft. "Dig into Lucas Hunter's background. I want everything. His parents, his school, his achievements. Anything that might give me a better picture of who he is." Emma nodded and left, and Elon was left alone with his thoughts, staring at the puzzle, wondering if he had made a mistake by agreeing to this challenge. Lucas Hunter's story began long before he ever heard of Elon Musk. His parents, Dr. James and Dr. Claire Hunter, were both physicists who had spent their careers working in academia and research. They were intellectuals at their core, both of them brilliant in their own right, but they had never anticipated the kind of intellect their son would exhibit. Lucas was born in Los Angeles, California, and from the moment he could speak, he had been startlingly advanced for his age. By age 2, he was reading fluently, devouring books about everything from basic algebra to quantum physics. By the time he was 3, he could solve simple calculus problems, and by 4, he had begun to speak about abstract mathematical concepts, like fractals and infinity, in a way that both amazed and terrified his parents. Dr. Claire Hunter, a professor of theoretical physics, was the first to notice Lucas's unusual cognitive abilities. "He's not just smart, James," she'd said one evening, pacing around their living room. "He's different." At age 5, Lucas began to design his first machines. It started with simple toys, Legos, and Tinker Toys, but soon progressed to more sophisticated structures, miniature robots, automatic systems powered by simple code, and self-propelled vehicles. His creations were far ahead of anything that a child his age should have been able to produce. But it wasn't just his IQ that set Lucas apart. It was his unrelenting curiosity and his deep desire to understand the world around him. While other children his age played games or watched cartoons, Lucas spent hours poring over books on philosophy, astronomy, artificial intelligence, and ethics. He didn't just read them. He questioned them, dissected them, and applied his understanding to real-world problems. When Lucas was 5, his parents enrolled him in a special program designed for gifted children. It was there that Lucas's true potential began to be recognized by the outside world. He took advanced courses, participated in science fairs, and quickly became the center of attention in academic circles. But despite his success, Lucas wasn't interested in fame or recognition. He wasn't seeking accolades. He simply wanted to know how things worked. Lucas's true genius lay in his ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. He had a unique way of approaching problems, often skipping steps that most people would follow, yet still arriving at the correct solution faster and more efficiently. His mind was constantly at work, analyzing the world around him, calculating outcomes, and connecting dots that no one else could even see. As Lucas's fame grew, so did his desire to find someone who could truly challenge him. His parents, who had watched him grow into a young genius, had tried to keep him grounded, discouraging him from seeking out intellectual competition. But Lucas, who had already outsmarted the brightest adults, became restless. He knew there had to be someone out there who could match him. And when he learned about Elon Musk, a visionary who had revolutionized multiple industries, Lucas knew that Musk was the one. It wasn't just Musk's intellect that intrigued Lucas. It was his ambition, the ability to dream big and, more importantly, to turn those dreams into reality. Lucas, despite his young age, shared that ambition. But he believed his vision for the future, one where humanity transcended its limitations, was clearer, more achievable than even Musk's grandest ideas. The idea to challenge Musk had come to Lucas one evening while reading about SpaceX's latest developments in the Mars colonization project. Why not see if Musk could solve the same problems I'm thinking about? Lucas thought. Maybe he's the kind of person who'd be willing to face a challenge, even from a kid like me. So, Lucas sent the email, concise, confident, and direct. A challenge, a test of intellect. And now, here he was, sitting across from Musk, watching him struggle with the same kinds of puzzles Lucas had already solved years ago. As the hours passed, Elon was no closer to solving the puzzle in front of him. The problem was rooted in the intricacies of dark matter, and while Musk's own expertise in physics and technology had taken him to incredible heights, he felt himself floundering. He could hear the hum of the air conditioning in the room, the occasional distant beep from the lab next door, but it all felt distant. His mind kept returning to the child sitting across from him. Lucas was so calm, so assured. He was unlike anyone Musk had ever met. And then, as if reading his mind, Lucas spoke. "Don't worry, Mr. Musk," he said, his tone warm yet cutting. "I know you're trying to figure it out, but you're going about it all wrong. The key to understanding dark matter isn't just about physics. It's about perspective. You have to think differently, outside of what you already know." Elon froze. For the first time that day, the pressure of the challenge seemed to lift. There was a deep truth in Lucas's words. And with that, something inside Elon clicked. He wasn't facing a puzzle to solve. He was facing a challenge to grow. Elon Musk sat back in his chair, staring at the puzzle in front of him, still feeling the weight of Lucas's words echoing in his mind. The key to understanding dark matter isn't just about physics. It's about perspective. It was a simple statement, but it carried a weight that Musk couldn't ignore. Lucas was right. Elon had always approached challenges with a mindset rooted in the knowledge he had accumulated over decades of work. But Lucas was asking him to step beyond that, to see things through a different lens. And it wasn't just about dark matter anymore. This challenge, this encounter, had begun to feel like something much bigger. Across from him, Lucas seemed to sense Elon's moment of clarity. The young prodigy didn't boast or smile smugly. Instead, he waited, quietly observing. The calmness with which he approached everything was, in itself, a kind of genius. Where Elon was often driven by urgency, impatience, and the pressure of the world's expectations, Lucas remained eerily composed. His entire demeanor spoke of an understanding that the process, not just the solution, was the true journey. "Mr. Musk," Lucas said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm and measured, without a hint of arrogance. "You've been thinking about this the wrong way. Dark matter isn't just about particles. It's about the way we view the universe itself. Think about it like a code, a system we haven't learned to read yet. It's not just about finding answers. It's about learning to ask the right questions." Elon blinked. The words hit him like a wave crashing against a cliff, reshaping his thoughts. "Right questions," Elon repeated under his breath, his mind whirring. It was a paradigm shift, one that made him feel both inspired and, for the first time in a long while, a little uncertain. Lucas wasn't just challenging him to solve a puzzle. He was forcing him to reframe the way he thought about problems, about technology, about life. Over the next few days, the challenges Lucas presented grew increasingly complex. Each one seemed to push Elon further out of his comfort zone. They ranged from riddles in quantum physics to questions about the ethical implications of artificial intelligence and even moral dilemmas about the future of humanity. One challenge stood out in particular. Lucas presented a problem involving the development of self-driving technology, which was something Elon had personally invested countless hours and resources into. The puzzle wasn't about the technology itself. It was about a hypothetical situation where autonomous vehicles were tasked with making life and death decisions in emergency scenarios. Elon immediately dove into the calculations and variables, but Lucas stopped him before he could get too far. "You're missing something," Lucas said. "You're thinking about it as an engineering problem. You're looking at the car, the sensors, the algorithms. But the real problem isn't in the vehicle. It's in the decision-making itself, in the moral framework you're building to guide the AI." Elon stared at the child. It was the first time anyone had pointed out that the core issue wasn't just the technology, but the ethics behind it, the consequences of creating machines that could make life-or-death decisions. It hit Elon hard. He had spent so much time thinking about the practical applications, the systems that needed to be built, the code that needed to be written. But Lucas had revealed something much more profound. The moral compass, the soul of the machines they were creating, had to be as carefully considered as the hardware itself. For a moment, Elon felt a wave of doubt wash over him. Was he really thinking deeply enough about the implications of his work? Was he seeing the bigger picture? Or was he too focused on the race to Mars, on the future of electric cars, on the next big technological leap? Lucas's calm, unwavering gaze held Elon's attention. "The future isn't just about who has the most advanced technology," Lucas continued. "It's about who can guide that technology with wisdom. And wisdom isn't just about knowledge. It's about understanding the human experience." As the challenges continued, so did the tension between Elon and Lucas. The puzzles grew more sophisticated, but so did the philosophical debates that came with them. Elon found himself increasingly fascinated by Lucas's perspective on the world. Yet, at times, he also felt a deep frustration. Lucas was challenging everything he thought he knew. Every answer Elon gave, every breakthrough he thought he had achieved, seemed to pale in comparison to the depth of insight Lucas brought to the table. Elon began to notice how different Lucas was from anyone he had ever met. His mind worked at lightning speed, not just calculating solutions but also analyzing the social and philosophical context behind every problem. Lucas didn't just understand the science. He understood its implications on humanity, on culture, and on the future of civilization. One evening, after a particularly intense discussion about AI and the future of human consciousness, Elon could feel the walls closing in. Lucas had just proposed a theory about AI that suggested machines would not only outthink humans in every way, but would eventually begin to shape human consciousness itself. This isn't just about machines getting smarter, Lucas said. It's about them becoming a part of us. Our minds will merge with theirs, and together, we'll transcend the limitations of biology. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. The idea was both fascinating and terrifying. It was one thing to think about Mars, about electric cars, about technology that could reshape industries. But it was another thing entirely to think about a future where the boundaries between human and machine didn't just blur, they completely disappeared. He was used to thinking about the future in terms of innovation and progress, but Lucas had shown him a side of it that was darker, more existential. What would it mean for humanity if machines not only surpassed us, but began to define what it meant to be human? For the first time since they had started the challenge, Elon felt a creeping sense of uncertainty. Was this the future he had been working toward? Or had he been so focused on the material aspects of technological advancement that he had ignored the deeper, more unsettling questions? The turning point came during a late-night conversation in SpaceX's conference room. Elon had invited Lucas to stay after hours to discuss their latest puzzle, a question about the long-term sustainability of Earth's resources. Elon had been working on a plan for solar energy that would one day power the entire planet. But as Lucas raised more and more questions about human consumption, population growth, and the inevitable depletion of natural resources, Elon began to feel the weight of his responsibility. "You're not just trying to get to Mars, are you?" Lucas asked quietly, looking up from his tablet. "You're trying to escape the consequences of human actions. But you can't escape. The future of Earth is just as important as the future of Mars." Elon's heart sank. For a moment, the weight of it all felt unbearable. Was he really trying to escape Earth's problems by colonizing Mars? Was he really just running from the very challenges he had once sworn to fix? Lucas continued, his voice low but steady. "Humanity doesn't need an escape plan, Mr. Musk. It needs a plan to stay, a plan to fix what's broken. The future is not about running away. It's about fixing the problems right here, right now." Elon's mind reeled. Lucas wasn't just an intellectual rival. He was a mirror, reflecting back everything Elon had been avoiding. The next few days after their conversation felt like a whirlwind. Elon Musk couldn't shake the feeling that he was in the middle of something bigger than he could control. What had started as a challenge from a child prodigy had slowly turned into a philosophical and intellectual battleground, one where the stakes felt impossibly high. Lucas Hunter wasn't just testing his ability to solve problems. He was testing his very beliefs about the future of humanity. The two had spent countless hours together in the lab and conference rooms of SpaceX. They debated everything: artificial intelligence, climate change, human space exploration, and the ethical considerations of all the technologies Elon had dedicated his life to developing. Every time Elon felt he was on the verge of a breakthrough, Lucas would introduce a new angle, a new perspective, forcing Elon to rethink his assumptions. It had all come to a head one evening, as they stood before a digital screen, a 3D model of Mars spinning in the air between them. "Look at this," Elon said, pointing to the screen. "This is humanity's future. This is where we're going. We can create a new home, a fresh start for civilization." Lucas crossed his arms and studied the image, his young face expressionless. "No," he replied quietly. "This is not the future." Elon felt a jolt of frustration. "What do you mean?" "This is it. This is the next step for humanity. Mars is the backup plan. Earth will burn if we don't act now." But Lucas wasn't convinced. "You're wrong, Mr. Musk. You're so focused on escaping Earth's problems that you're ignoring the real issue. The problems of humanity. Mars is a distraction. It's a way to avoid confronting what's wrong with us here, right now." Elon's brow furrowed. "And what exactly do you think is wrong with humanity? You really want me to say it out loud?" Lucas asked, his voice calm but sharp. "We're too focused on ourselves. We consume resources without thinking of the long-term consequences. We pollute. We fight wars over things that don't matter. We've grown too disconnected from nature and the world around us." Elon's fingers drummed nervously on the tabletop, his usual confidence faltering. This was the first time Lucas had directly challenged the very foundation of his vision for the future. You're talking about change, big change. But that doesn't happen just by wishing for it. People don't want change unless it's forced on them. They want progress. They want comfort. Look at the advances we've made in technology, in space exploration. We can fix everything if we just keep pushing forward. Mars is the next step? Lucas shook his head. No, Elon. Progress for the sake of progress isn't the answer. We've built so much and yet, we've ignored the most important thing, ourselves. The reason we're in this mess isn't because we lack technology. It's because we haven't learned how to live with it responsibly. We don't understand the implications of our actions. Mars won't fix that. It will only delay the inevitable. Elon felt his heart racing. You think I'm running away from Earth's problems, don't you? Lucas's gaze was steady. Yes, and I think you're too afraid to face the real issue. The problem is not that we need a new planet. The problem is that we need to change the way we live on Earth. We need to shift our values, our priorities. Otherwise, no matter how many rockets you build or how many new technologies you create, we'll just repeat the same mistakes. Elon was silent. The words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. The conversation between them continued, but it no longer felt like a simple debate. It had transformed into something more profound. Elon had built his empire on the premise that humanity's future was not limited to Earth, that space exploration was the key to ensuring the survival of the human race. But Lucas was suggesting that this might be a cop-out, a way of avoiding the real, hard work of improving humanity's existence here on Earth. Elon knew that Lucas was challenging him in ways no one had ever dared. As much as he tried to push back, to argue, a part of him couldn't help but wonder, what if Lucas was right? What if humanity's issues weren't about the environment or technology or even space, but about the very way people lived? The more Elon thought about it, the more the questions gnawed at him. How could he, someone so obsessed with technology, have missed the moral and philosophical underpinnings of everything he was building? And if he couldn't answer those deeper questions, could he truly be helping humanity? Or was he just building a future where humanity could run away from its mistakes? As these thoughts swirled in his head, a new kind of doubt began to creep in. Elon had always believed in the potential of technology to solve problems. But maybe Lucas was right. Maybe the answers didn't lie in building rockets or launching satellites. Maybe the answers lay in how humanity chose to evolve, to confront the issues they'd created for themselves on Earth before reaching for the stars. The day after their heated debate, Lucas surprised Elon with an invitation. It wasn't just a casual dinner or a simple social gathering. This was something much more serious. "I want you to come with me to a place," Lucas said, his voice matter of fact. "A place that could change the way you see everything." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," Lucas replied. "Just trust me." The plane ride back from the secluded valley was long and quiet. Elon stared out of the window, his mind spinning. The landscape below was a patchwork of fields and cities. But in his head, it was the pristine valley Lucas had shown him. The peaceful, simple way of life that stood in stark contrast to the chaos of modern civilization. The idea that perhaps there was more to humanity's future than just technological advancement, a possibility that had never fully entered his mind until now, had taken root. But there was also something else gnawing at him, a sense of frustration, a frustration with how deeply Lucas had gotten under his skin. It wasn't just the challenge Lucas presented to his worldview. It was the way Lucas seemed to see through him, past all the ambitions, past all the ideas that had defined his life. And that was unsettling. Who was this child to know more than him? Who was he to question everything Elon had worked for? Elon rubbed his temples, trying to clear his thoughts. The truth was, he was at a crossroads. His entire life had been dedicated to advancing humanity, to building a future where people didn't have to suffer, where Earth's resources didn't dictate the trajectory of civilization. Mars had been his answer to that. He believed that humans needed a backup plan, a way to ensure the survival of the species in case Earth couldn't sustain them. But now, after seeing the valley, after hearing Lucas's arguments, everything felt different. The future didn't feel so simple anymore. The tension finally erupted during their drive back to SpaceX headquarters. Lucas had been unusually quiet in the car, his small frame staring out the window, lost in thought. Elon could feel the weight of the silence hanging between them, a silent chasm that had been slowly growing ever since the valley. "I don't get it, Lucas," Elon said, breaking the silence. "You want me to give up everything I've worked for? You want me to stop all this? All the work, all the progress we've made?" Lucas turned toward him, his eyes calm but piercing. "It's not about giving up progress. It's about realizing that the kind of progress you're chasing isn't going to solve the real problems. It's a distraction. Mars doesn't fix humanity's issues. It only delays them." Elon's heart raced. The words were simple, but they felt like an accusation, a challenge to everything he had built. "You don't get it," Elon shot back. "It's not about delaying problems. It's about giving humanity a chance at survival. You're too focused on ideals. Earth is dying. The environment is crumbling. There are people out there who don't even have access to clean water, to food, to basic dignity. You think we can fix all that with a lifestyle change? This isn't about balance or simplicity. This is about survival. We need a backup. We need Mars." Lucas's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're so caught up in the race to save humanity, Elon, that you're ignoring the fact that humanity is already destroying itself. Mars won't save you from your own mistakes. You can't escape your own problems. You have to face them." The words hit like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, Elon was silent. The rawness of the truth stunned him. But anger rose up, too. Who was Lucas to say this? Who was this boy to think he knew better? Face them? By building a utopia on Earth? That's not how this works. If we don't escape to Mars, humanity is doomed to the same mistakes. "We're running out of time, Lucas." Lucas shook his head, his expression still calm. "You're wrong. Escaping isn't the answer. You can't escape your way out of the problems you created. You have to fix them. The future isn't about getting to Mars or getting to some new planet. It's about fixing the systems that are broken here, right now on Earth, before it's too late." Elon's frustration boiled over. He slammed his fist on the dashboard. "You don't understand. You're too young. You're just a kid. You haven't been out there, fighting to make the impossible possible. You haven't faced the risks, the failures, the constant pressure of knowing that if you don't succeed, the world won't change. You don't understand what it's like to make the hard choices, to face the consequences of inaction." Lucas's eyes didn't waver. "Maybe I don't understand the pressure, but I understand the cost. If we keep trying to fix the world with technology, without fixing the hearts of people, we'll destroy everything, Elon. You can't solve humanity's problems with more rockets, more cars, more space stations. You solve them by changing the way people live, think, and relate to each other and the Earth." Elon was silent. The weight of Lucas's words sank deep into him, deeper than he wanted to admit. He looked out the window, his mind a storm of conflicting thoughts. What if he was wrong? What if Lucas was right, and the whole future of humanity depended not on escaping to Mars, but on transforming how people lived right here on Earth? The drive continued in silence, each man lost in his own thoughts. When they arrived back at SpaceX headquarters, it was late. The building was mostly empty, the lights dim. But as they walked through the long corridors, Elon could feel a strange, unshakable tension between them. There was no anger anymore, just a profound sense of uncertainty. Elon stopped in front of his office door, staring at it for a long moment. He had worked so hard for this life, this dream of space exploration, of pushing humanity beyond the confines of Earth. It had consumed him. It had been his single focus for decades. But now, it didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt like a flight from responsibility. "Lucas," Elon said quietly, his voice almost unrecognizable, "I don't know what to do. I've spent my entire life chasing the stars, and now I'm starting to wonder if I've been running away from the real issues all along. What if you're right? What if Mars isn't the answer?" Lucas stood there for a moment, his eyes softening just a little. "I'm not saying it's a bad thing to dream of Mars, Elon. What I'm saying is, maybe you need to ask yourself why you're doing it. Are you doing it because it's the right thing for humanity? Or are you doing it because you don't know how to fix the problems that are already here?" Elon's breath hitched. The words stung, but there was truth in them, truth he hadn't been able to face until now. And suddenly, he felt like the entire weight of the universe had shifted. Elon didn't know how long he stood there, processing everything Lucas had said. He wasn't sure what the future held anymore, but for the first time, he could see the road ahead. It wasn't just about rockets and missions to Mars. It was about something much deeper. Could he really change the course of humanity? Could he use all of his resources, all of his knowledge, to help fix what was broken right here, on Earth? Could he put aside his obsession with space exploration and focus on the human race's survival, not through escape, but through evolution? But the questions were endless. The challenges were daunting. The solutions were unknown. As Lucas turned to leave, he paused and looked back at Elon. I think you're more capable of answering these questions than anyone else on the planet. But it starts with you. You have to decide what kind of future you want to build. And then, you have to make it happen. No one else can do that for you. Elon stood frozen in place, the weight of those words settling on his shoulders. There was no turning back now. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain. It was going to be the hardest journey of his life. The days following the argument with Lucas were like a heavy fog that refused to lift. Elon Musk had always been the kind of person who thrived under pressure, who lived for the next big breakthrough. But now, the very foundation of his life's work was shaking. He sat in his office at SpaceX, staring at the wall of screens displaying ongoing space missions and the ambitious blueprints for the next Mars colony. But instead of feeling pride, a sense of dread washed over him. For the first time in years, he couldn't look at these images with the same certainty. The promise of the stars, the burning desire to colonize Mars, to push humanity beyond the limits of Earth. These dreams, once so clear and intoxicating, now felt hollow. It was as if he were staring into a void, a future that could be full of possibilities, but also full of escape, of avoidance. The voices in his head clashed. Mars or Earth? Technology or humanity? Elon had dedicated his entire life to solving problems with engineering and innovation, but what Lucas had said about the need for a philosophical shift, a spiritual awakening about how humanity lived, well, that hit Elon in a way nothing ever had before. Could he truly abandon his lifelong obsession with space exploration to focus on something as intangible as humanity's collective soul? Elon's mind was racing, but there was something about Lucas's challenge that kept gnawing at him. He couldn't let it go. You can't fix the world with more rockets. The thought echoed in his mind, reverberating with an uncomfortable truth that he had tried so hard to avoid. Every day, he had been focused on building a bridge to the future, but Lucas was asking him to stop and examine the foundation beneath it. Was he so determined to escape Earth's problems that he had forgotten about the real work that needed to be done right here? The conflict inside him grew with every passing hour. It wasn't just intellectual, it was emotional. The choice Lucas had forced upon him wasn't just a matter of technology. It was about his identity, his purpose. If Elon weren't the man who built rockets, who dreamt of conquering Mars, then who was he? He couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas was right. But every part of him recoiled from that truth. He had already given so much to this dream, poured his blood, sweat, and tears into the vision of humanity's future in space. To let go of that now felt like betraying everything he had worked for. That evening, as the lights of SpaceX headquarters flickered softly in the distance, Elon made a decision. It wasn't a decision to abandon Mars or his technological ambitions, but rather a decision to rethink them, to redirect his focus. What if the answer was not in abandoning space, but in reimagining humanity's path forward? One that embraced both the need for technological advancement and the need for a deep, societal reckoning with the way humanity had been living. Elon called a meeting with his closest advisors the next morning. The mood in the room was tense. They knew something was different about the way Elon was behaving, the way he was speaking. The usual air of certainty that Elon Musk exuded was replaced with a quiet intensity, a weight that seemed to hang over every word. I need to tell you all something, Elon began, his voice steady but filled with purpose. I've been wrong. For years, I've been focused on building a future out in the stars, on Mars. But I've realized that the real work, starts here, on Earth. There was a stunned silence in the room. No one spoke. The people in this room had dedicated their lives to the vision Elon had shared. Mars was their goal, their mission. To hear him question that was like hearing a captain abandon his ship in the middle of a storm. "What are you saying, Elon?" one of the engineers finally asked, his voice wary. "Mars, it's still our mission, our calling. We can't abandon it now." "I'm not abandoning Mars," Elon replied firmly. "I'm rethinking it. We're not going to stop the Mars mission, but we need to reframe our thinking. We can't just build rockets and leave Earth behind. We need to ask ourselves a deeper question. What kind of future are we really trying to build?" The room was still, the tension palpable. Elon took a deep breath and continued, "We need to address the bigger issues. Climate change, resource depletion, inequality. These are the problems we should be focusing on. We've spent too much time running away from these problems, thinking that Mars will solve them. But the truth is, humanity's future depends on how we solve these problems here, on Earth. Before we can take our next steps in space, we have to take a hard look at the world we're living in." Elon's advisors exchanged glances. The implications of his words were huge. This wasn't just about altering the mission. It was about changing the fundamental vision of what SpaceX, and Elon himself, stood for. "Where do we start?" one of the engineers asked. "We start by innovating in ways that benefit Earth," Elon said, his voice growing more confident. "We need to create technology that regenerates the planet, that helps humanity rebuild what's been broken. We need solutions that improve life here and now, while still working towards the dream of Mars. But we can't do it at the cost of our planet. We've got one shot at this." Elon's mind was now clear. His obsession with space exploration would not be abandoned, but it would no longer be the center of his world. What if the key to Mars was not the technology of space travel, but the sustainability of life on Earth? What if the answer to humanity's survival wasn't in escaping the Earth, but in healing it? The next few weeks were a blur of action. Elon began to initiate new projects, ones that would help address the most pressing problems facing Earth. SpaceX and Tesla would both pivot, incorporating advanced green technologies, sustainable energy, and carbon capture initiatives into their designs. The goal was no longer just about launching rockets to Mars. It was about using innovation to change the trajectory of humanity right here, on Earth. He called it the New Earth Initiative. The idea was simple yet ambitious. Leverage cutting-edge technologies to repair the damage done to Earth so that humanity could thrive sustainably. Mars was still the long-term goal, but Earth needed to be the first priority. Through all this, Lucas's influence was never far from Elon's mind. The boy had pushed him to confront the uncomfortable reality that no amount of rockets, no amount of technology, could solve humanity's deepest problems unless people began to change the way they lived. Elon could still remember their heated conversations, the way Lucas had challenged everything Elon had built his career around. But now, he didn't feel angry. He felt grateful. Grateful that Lucas had shaken him out of his tunnel vision and forced him to think differently. In a way, Lucas had awakened something inside Elon. A new sense of responsibility, a new understanding of what the future needed to look like. Mars was important, but Earth's survival had to come first. As the weeks went on, the shift in SpaceX's mission began to ripple through the company, through Tesla, and even through the world. News outlets covered Elon's new focus, questioning whether it was a retreat from the grand ambitions of space travel. Some hailed him as a visionary, while others accused him of abandoning humanity's greatest hope. But Elon didn't care about the critics. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with resistance and challenges. He didn't expect everyone to understand, but he felt a deep certainty that he was on the right path. Elon Musk sat at his desk in the quiet of his office, watching the news on one of his many screens. The world was buzzing with speculation, as it always did when Elon Musk made an announcement. But this time, it wasn't about Mars or a new rocket design. It was about a shift, a seismic change in his vision. The New Earth Initiative had become the focal point of every major headline. Elon Musk shifts focus. New Earth Initiative puts sustainability first. SpaceX's new mission, to save Earth before colonizing Mars. Tesla's green revolution. Musk's bold plan for planetary survival. The reactions had been mixed. Environmentalists cheered the move, celebrating the fact that Musk was finally focusing on Earth's sustainability. Critics, however, were quick to dismiss it as a PR stunt, or worse, an admission that Musk had failed in his ultimate goal to make humanity a multiplanetary species. There was no middle ground. But what surprised Elon most wasn't the criticism. It was the unexpected support that began pouring in, from places he never thought he'd see it. It started with a call from Bill Gates. The Microsoft co-founder and billionaire philanthropist had never been an outspoken supporter of Musk's ventures, especially not when it came to space. Gates had always been focused on the real-world problems that affected humanity right now. So when Elon received a call from him, he wasn't sure what to expect. Elon, Bill's voice was steady, but there was a trace of warmth in it. I've been watching what you're doing with the New Earth Initiative. I have to admit, I'm impressed. Elon leaned back in his chair, stunned. He had never expected Gates to back him, especially after years of competing for attention in the tech world. Impressed? You've been outspoken about Mars. I didn't think you'd be on board with this. There's a difference between escaping to Mars and using technology to fix the real problems we face here on Earth, Gates replied. You've got the resources to make a real difference, Elon. You've always been a disruptor. If you can bring that same energy to solving Earth's problems, we'll have a shot. Elon's mind raced. Bill Gates had been one of the world's most visible advocates for global health, climate change, and poverty reduction. If someone like Gates was supportive, maybe the tide was finally turning in favor of his new vision. I appreciate that, Bill, Elon said, his voice more genuine than he had intended. I'm hoping this can be a game changer for all of us. Maybe it's time to stop running away and start fixing what's broken. I agree, Gates said. Let's talk more about how we can collaborate. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been focusing on climate and clean energy solutions. SpaceX and Tesla's reach could be pivotal. I think there's an opportunity here to combine our efforts. Elon's heart quickened. This was unexpected. Gates was offering more than just moral support. He was offering resources, expertise, and collaboration. It was the kind of partnership that could amplify the New Earth Initiative on a global scale. As news of Bill Gates' support began to circulate, other unexpected allies started to emerge. Several prominent figures in the environmental movement, who had previously been critical of Musk's focus on Mars, now saw the New Earth Initiative as a sign of his commitment to sustainability. Greta Thunberg, the Swedish environmental activist, tweeted, "The world needs leadership like this. We can't keep pretending that space travel will save us from our own destruction. We need to focus on healing the Earth, and Elon Musk might just be the one to lead the way." It was a message that resonated widely. For years, critics had labeled Musk as an out-of-touch billionaire obsessed with space. But now, his pivot to focus on Earth's issues seemed to finally align with the environmentalist goals. More than that, it showed that Musk was capable of adapting, of evolving, which was a trait many didn't think he possessed. Musk's social media accounts were flooded with messages of support, but also a number of skeptics who accused him of backpedaling or even of being a climate change opportunist. The criticisms were sharp, but Elon didn't mind. The message from Gates and the unexpected praise from figures like Thunberg made him feel that he was on the right path. Just as the wave of support began to solidify, a new, unforeseen challenge arose, a crisis that would test the very principles Musk had been advocating. In the midst of his newfound focus on sustainability, a catastrophic environmental disaster struck. A sudden, intense heat wave, exacerbated by rising global temperatures, had caused a massive power grid failure across much of the western United States. Thousands of people were left without electricity during one of the hottest summers on record, leading to widespread blackouts, food shortages, and even fatalities. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. The media turned their focus back to Elon Musk. How would the man who had promised to help save the planet respond to such a disaster? The pressure on Musk mounted almost immediately. Governments, environmental organizations, and citizens alike were all looking for answers. Was this the beginning of a new era of environmental collapse? Was Elon's New Earth Initiative too late? Within hours of the crisis unfolding, Elon knew what he had to do. This wasn't just about long-term sustainability projects anymore. This was about responding to an urgent, immediate need, right now. Musk pulled together a team of engineers and experts from Tesla, SpaceX, and the newly established branches of the New Earth Initiative. They began working around the clock to provide emergency support for those affected by the blackout. Tesla's solar technology, which had been deployed in some areas but not on the massive scale required, would be repurposed to power homes and hospitals in affected areas. Musk also made calls to his partners at Solar City, coordinating a massive effort to bring temporary solar solutions to communities in need. In addition, SpaceX's satellite division immediately began working on expanding their low-orbit internet connectivity system to help provide critical communications in the disaster zones. The world was watching, and Musk's response was swift and relentless. As the news cycle turned toward his actions, many began to see Musk's quick, hands-on approach as a reflection of his commitment to the New Earth Initiative. It wasn't about Mars anymore. It was about now, about Earth, about saving lives. But there was still a long road ahead. Musk knew this was just the beginning. As the blackout subsided and the immediate crisis began to stabilize, the long-term challenge of rebuilding and creating a more resilient, sustainable infrastructure was just beginning. The heat wave was a wake-up call that would reverberate across the planet. As Elon Musk stood on the balcony of his SpaceX headquarters, overlooking the sprawling complex below, a strange sense of peace washed over him. It wasn't the peace of someone who had solved all the problems of the world, but rather the peace of someone who had finally taken a step in the right direction. The New Earth Initiative wasn't just a dream anymore. It was becoming a movement. He knew the world wasn't going to change overnight. There would be setbacks. There would be critics. But for the first time, Elon Musk felt a sense of purpose that extended beyond the stars. The Earth was his true challenge now, and with it, his true legacy would be forged. The crisis that had rocked the western United States was no isolated event. It had set off a chain reaction across the globe. Record temperatures, wildfires in the Arctic, floods in coastal cities. The heat wave had been a harbinger of things to come, and now, the entire world was on edge. The media, which had once been skeptical of Elon Musk's New Earth Initiative, was now paying attention with newfound urgency. Every day, stories surfaced about how Musk's companies were stepping up to help mitigate the effects of the heatwave disaster. Tesla had announced plans to roll out solar solutions to regions affected by the power outages, while SpaceX worked to expand its satellite internet network to provide relief to isolated communities. But the true measure of Musk's response was not just in the technology he provided. It was in the way he had shifted the conversation. No longer was Mars the focal point of his speeches and interviews. Musk had embraced a more grounded message. Saving Earth is humanity's first priority. We can't fix what's broken by running to the stars. We need to heal ourselves, here, on this planet. As the world watched, a new wave of public support began to sweep across the globe. Political leaders, environmentalists, scientists, and even corporate executives who had once been dismissive of Musk's vision began to reconsider their positions. The global response to the New Earth Initiative was not just driven by public opinion. Governments around the world began to realize that the crisis wasn't just a disaster. It was an opportunity to shift their own policies in favor of sustainability and long-term environmental health. But would they be able to act fast enough to match the momentum Musk had sparked? In Washington, D.C., President Eleanor Hayes called for an emergency summit with world leaders to discuss the implications of the ongoing environmental disaster. In her speech, she acknowledged that this heat wave was just the beginning, and that the world needed to act now, before it was too late. The time for inaction is over. We must pivot our economies towards sustainability, Hayes declared in a broadcast that went viral. We cannot wait for the future. The future is now, and it starts with the kind of bold leadership we've seen from Elon Musk. The summit was attended by leaders from the European Union, China, India, and several key African nations. While not everyone agreed with Musk's New Earth Initiative in its entirety, many of them saw it as a blueprint for a more resilient future. China's President Li Jian announced that the country would commit to a major expansion of renewable energy infrastructure, marking the beginning of a new, aggressive push to combat climate change. European leaders pledged to double down on the Green New Deal and strengthen carbon emissions reduction efforts. Even countries with significant fossil fuel economies, like Saudi Arabia and Russia, began to adjust their rhetoric. At the summit, Russia's President Vladimir Petrov promised to invest in renewable energy and reduced the country's reliance on oil and gas. Saudi Arabia announced plans to invest heavily in solar technology, something they had previously been reluctant to pursue. But while the political world was beginning to mobilize, not everyone was eager to embrace Musk's new vision. As governments rallied behind the idea of a more sustainable future, not all corporations were on board. Some saw Musk's focus on Earth's recovery as a threat to their business models, particularly those whose operations were still heavily reliant on fossil fuels and traditional industrial processes. One of the most vocal critics was Dominic Wright, CEO of Apex Energy, a powerful multinational corporation that had built its empire on oil and natural gas. Wright was a direct adversary of Musk, having long opposed his space ambitions as a waste of resources. Now, Wright was taking a public stand against Musk's pivot toward sustainability. Let's be clear, Wright declared in an interview on CNBC. Elon Musk is playing with fire. He wants to reshape the global economy, put our industries out of business, and send us all back to the Stone Age. His so-called New Earth initiative is not only unrealistic, it's dangerous. Wright's stance was shared by many other powerful figures in the fossil fuel industry, who began to form alliances in opposition to Musk's growing influence. They argued that Musk's vision was too idealistic and that the world still needed oil and gas for economic growth. But Musk was prepared for the pushback. Throughout his career, he had been a master of taking on large, entrenched industries. Now, he was in a battle for the future, not just with governments, but with corporate titans who didn't want to let go of their profits. Elon Musk knew that winning the fight for Earth's future meant more than just convincing governments and companies to change. He needed to prove that his vision wasn't just a lofty dream. It was practical, achievable, and necessary. Musk made a bold move. He unveiled a new partnership between Tesla, SpaceX, and a coalition of environmental organizations, including the Sierra Club and Greenpeace. This partnership would work together to provide innovative solutions to climate-related challenges on a global scale. The coalition's goal was to create sustainable energy infrastructures in developing nations, advance carbon capture technologies, and promote sustainable agriculture practices that could reverse environmental degradation. "We're not here to just talk," Musk said in a press conference that made headlines across the world. "We're here to act. And we're starting now, with a global partnership that will tackle climate change head-on. This is about action. This is about solutions." In addition to the partnership, Musk announced that SpaceX would begin using its satellite technology to provide low-cost internet access to communities in developing countries, enabling them to participate in the digital economy and access critical information on climate change, sustainability practices, and renewable energy solutions. Musk's announcement was met with enthusiasm in some quarters, but with skepticism in others. Critics were quick to point out that Musk's companies had been known for high-profile failures, such as delays in the rollout of the Tesla Cybertruck and challenges with SpaceX's Mars ambitions. Could Musk really deliver on such a monumental promise? Despite the corporate resistance and public skepticism, something significant was happening. As the heatwave disaster continued to unfold, and with global temperatures rising, more and more people began to realize that the status quo was no longer sustainable. The public had been awakened, and many were ready for change. Protests demanding action on climate change grew larger by the day. Grassroots organizations, young activists, and even some labor unions began to rally around the New Earth initiative. The call for climate justice became louder and more urgent. People were no longer waiting for politicians or corporations to take the lead. They were demanding it. In the United States, a growing number of cities began to adopt Musk's ideas, implementing policies for greater sustainability and carbon neutrality. Tesla's solar products were now in high demand, and the company's electric vehicles were quickly becoming the standard for environmentally conscious consumers. The New Earth initiative was no longer just Musk's pet project. It had become a global movement, one that united governments, businesses, and everyday people in a shared effort to heal the planet. Yet the road ahead was far from easy. Musk still faced opposition from entrenched interests, and the scale of the crisis was far greater than anyone could have predicted. But with every new alliance, every new initiative, and every new project, Musk's vision for the future was taking shape. The world was changing, slowly but surely. And Elon Musk, the man who had once dreamed of building a colony on Mars, was now leading the charge to save the only planet humanity had ever called home. The world had shifted, but now Elon Musk had to navigate the complexities of managing a movement that was as expansive as it was ambitious. What started as a crisis response had evolved into a full-fledged revolution, a rethinking of how humanity could live on Earth and how to repair the damage it had done. But like any revolution, the path forward was not a straight line. The momentum was undeniable. The partnerships Musk had built with governments, corporations, and environmental groups were gaining traction. The media had changed its tune, with many outlets now framing Musk as the global leader of the sustainability movement. In some circles, the New Earth Initiative was seen as the way forward, the future of humanity. But with that power came enormous responsibility and an ever-growing target on Musk's back. Musk had always been a master at creating networks, whether through his companies or his ventures into space exploration. But this was different. This was not about launching a car into space or designing a self-driving truck. This was about uniting the globe under one cause and making sustainable development a universal priority. One of the most significant milestones came when Musk announced the creation of the Global Sustainability Alliance, GSA, a partnership of governments, companies, and non-profit organizations dedicated to accelerating the global transition to clean energy and sustainable practices. The alliance's ambitious goal was to leverage cutting-edge technology to make renewable energy universally accessible, restore ecosystems, and stabilize the climate. Musk's role as the public face of the GSA gave him unprecedented influence. Yet he knew that the true power of the initiative wasn't in his name. It was in the collective will of the network he had formed. Every government that signed on, every company that pledged to go green, and every scientist and activist who joined the cause added a new layer of legitimacy to the movement. To build this network, Musk relied heavily on the work of his companies, Tesla and SpaceX. Tesla, with its advanced battery storage technology, was playing a key role in integrating renewable energy sources, solar, wind, and hydro, into the power grids of countries around the world. SpaceX was instrumental in providing satellite internet to rural and underserved communities, creating a connected world that could share resources, ideas, and innovations in real time. While the alliance had garnered significant support, it also faced fierce resistance from powerful nations and corporations that stood to lose from the global transition Musk was advocating. These stakeholders had the resources and political clout to slow down the shift. As expected, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and some other oil-rich nations were not fully on board with the GSA. They had a vested interest in maintaining their influence in the global energy market and were hesitant to transition away from fossil fuels. Russia's President Petrov, who had initially expressed willingness to participate in the New Earth Initiative, began to backpedal. At a summit in Moscow, he denounced the GSA, calling it an unrealistic utopia and suggesting that Musk's push for renewable energy would destabilize economies, particularly those that depended on fossil fuels for jobs and revenue. Petrov wasn't alone. Saudi Arabia's Prince Faisal Al Saud declared that while the country would invest in solar technology, it would remain committed to oil production. "We will not be bullied into abandoning our economic foundation," he said during a televised interview. "We must protect our workers, our people, and our way of life." Musk took these criticisms in stride. For years, he had dealt with critics who accused him of being out of touch with reality, but he knew that true change would never come without opposition. And the resistance, while loud, was shrinking. The actions of these nations only underscored the very point Musk had been making, that the world needed to evolve or risk collapsing under the weight of its outdated systems. While political resistance grew louder, a new breed of activists began to emerge, young leaders who saw the GSA not just as a necessary response to the environmental crisis, but as a new form of empowerment. These were people who had grown up in the shadow of climate change, individuals whose lives had been shaped by natural disasters, rising sea levels, and unprecedented heat waves. Among these young leaders was Isabella Ramirez, a 25-year-old climate activist from Brazil, whose passion for sustainability had propelled her to the forefront of international discussions. Isabella had been inspired by the work of both Elon Musk and Greta Thunberg, but her vision extended beyond just reducing emissions. She wanted to see a complete societal transformation, a world where sustainability wasn't an option, but a fundamental principle. Change doesn't just happen in government boardrooms or corporate meetings, Isabella said during a panel discussion with Musk. It happens on the ground, in our communities, in our homes, in the way we live. We need to take action now, not just for us, but for future generations. Her words resonated with many young people across the globe. Her grassroots efforts began to form a new, energized wave of activists who were ready to mobilize not only against climate inaction, but against the powerful industries that fueled it. Isabella's movement wasn't just about protesting. It was about creating tangible, local solutions to the environmental problems their communities faced. Her group, Generation Green, began to work closely with the GSA, pushing for more local solutions, including urban farming, sustainable construction, and water conservation techniques. Isabella and her team would eventually become key players in pushing Musk's global vision into everyday action, making sure that the movement didn't remain just a top-down initiative, but became a grassroots movement that empowered people at the local level. As the global network grew, Musk's push for sustainability began to ripple through the corporate world. Tesla's stock was at an all-time high, and the company had become the symbol of the clean energy revolution. But other companies, who had once been hesitant to embrace the shift to green technologies, were starting to reconsider their positions. Companies like General Electric, Amazon, and Apple began to announce plans to reduce their carbon footprints and invest in renewable energy. Even traditional car manufacturers, like Ford and General Motors, pledged to transition to electric vehicles within the next decade. The movement was gaining real momentum. Some were calling it the new industrial revolution, but not all businesses were convinced that the transition would work for them. The fossil fuel giants, ExxonMobil, BP, and Chevron, began lobbying governments to slow down the rollout of renewable energy policies, arguing that the transition would lead to widespread job losses and economic instability. In response, Musk ramped up his advocacy, making it clear that the future of energy would create more jobs than it would destroy. Transitioning to renewable energy isn't just about saving the planet, Musk said during an interview at the World Economic Forum. It's about creating a new economy, one that's built on the industries of the future, not the industries of the past. To help smooth the transition, Musk proposed a $50 billion investment into retraining workers from the fossil fuel industry. His goal was not just to replace oil rigs with solar panels, but to create new opportunities for people who were dependent on the old systems. Despite all the progress, tensions were rising. The global network was growing stronger, but so was the opposition. Governments were moving slowly, and entrenched interests in the fossil fuel industry were doing everything they could to stop the shift. In the United States, senators from oil-producing states began to push back against the Green New Deal, citing concerns about the economic consequences of a rapid shift to green technologies. Meanwhile, environmental groups began criticizing Musk for not being radical enough in his approach. Earth is on the brink, one activist shouted during a demonstration in Washington. We don't have time to wait for billionaires and politicians to get their act together. The time to act is now. Musk understood the urgency, but he also knew that true global change didn't happen through protests alone. It required political will, corporate responsibility, and a shift in the very way people thought about their relationship to the planet. As the weeks passed, the pressure began to mount. Would Musk's movement be able to hold together, or would it fragment under the weight of political and corporate resistance? The tipping point came during a critical summit in Paris. It was here that Musk would have to prove whether his global vision for sustainability could be more than just a dream. With world leaders, CEOs, and activists all gathered in one room, the pressure on Musk was immense. Could he unite them all? Or would the weight of their conflicting interests tear the movement apart? Musk took to the stage, alone, just him and his vision. The room was filled with skeptics, supporters, and everyone in between. The future of Earth, it seemed, rested on this very moment. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The air in the conference hall was thick with anticipation. World leaders, business magnates, activists, and scientists filled the Grand Parisian auditorium, their eyes trained on Elon Musk as he stepped up to the stage. This wasn't just another corporate presentation or governmental speech. It was the moment where Musk's entire vision for the future would either solidify or crumble. The New Earth initiative had gained remarkable momentum in recent months. Governments around the world had made significant commitments to renewable energy, while Tesla's solar panels and electric vehicles were now ubiquitous in many countries. SpaceX's satellite internet had connected underserved communities, and Musk's Global Sustainability Alliance, GSA, was seen by many as the last, best hope to heal the planet. But as with every revolution, opposition was just as loud as the support. Oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia had already made it clear that they would not bow to Musk's vision. Powerful corporations with a vested interest in maintaining the status quo were quietly undermining the movement. And even within Musk's own coalition, cracks were starting to appear. Some activists wanted more radical action. Some political leaders wanted to move slower to avoid economic disruptions. And some of the world's most influential CEOs, who had been reluctant to back Musk's vision at all, were starting to pull back their commitments. The Paris Climate Summit was intended to be the moment where the global community came together to make binding commitments to fight climate change. Hosted in a state-of-the-art convention center, the room was filled with excitement, but also underlying tension. At the front of the stage, a massive screen displayed the words, "The future of Earth, a collective responsibility." Musk had agreed to address the summit directly, his speech being the keynote event of the day. As he walked onto the stage, the applause was enthusiastic, though it was clear that there were still skeptics in the crowd. Musk adjusted the microphone and began speaking in his usual calm, methodical tone. For years, he began, we've treated Earth as if it was an endless resource, something we could exploit indefinitely. But that's not the world we live in anymore. What we've seen in the last decade, the heat waves, the floods, the wildfires, should have been our warning. The crisis is no longer a theory. It's our reality. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. This is not about saving the planet, he continued. Earth will be fine. The question is whether or not humanity will survive to witness it. A ripple of agreement swept through the crowd, but there were murmurs of dissent as well. Musk could feel the unease. He had always thrived on being a disruptor, but today the stakes were higher than ever before. The science is clear, he went on. We need to transition to renewable energy. We need to restore our ecosystems. We need to change the way we think about our planet and our place in it. At that moment, the doors at the back of the auditorium opened, and a small group of figures entered, creating a brief stir. It was Dominic Wright, the CEO of Apex Energy, flanked by several high-ranking officials from the oil industry, including the Russian ambassador to the United Nations. Musk knew they had arrived as expected, the forces of opposition. After Musk's speech, a series of presentations began, each one making the case for action in a variety of sectors: energy, agriculture, transportation, and technology. The room was filled with optimism, as world leaders and corporations pledged billions of dollars to renewable energy projects and carbon offset programs. But the mood shifted dramatically when Dominic Wright took the stage. Known for his combative approach to environmental policy, Wright wasted no time in attacking Musk's vision. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. This is the future Musk wants you to believe in. A future where we destroy industries, dismantle economies, and eliminate jobs. His vision is a dystopia, not a utopia. Musk's New Earth initiative is a fantasy that ignores the realities of global commerce and human labor. The room fell into a hushed silence, but Wright's words hung in the air. Renewable energy is not the answer. The world still needs oil. We need it for jobs, for stability, for the global economy. If we tear down our infrastructure without thinking about the consequences, we'll end up with a fractured, unstable world. Wright's comments were followed by a series of rebuttals from other industry leaders who questioned Musk's timeline and feasibility. One by one, they highlighted potential job losses in traditional energy sectors and the uncertain future of the global economy. At that moment, Musk could feel the pressure mounting. His vision, which had been gaining so much ground, was now under direct attack from some of the most powerful forces in the world. But Musk was no stranger to adversity. He had faced much worse before. With a sharp breath, he stood at the podium and calmly replied. "I don't disagree with you," Musk said, addressing Wright directly. "There will be disruption. There will be job losses. But that's precisely why we can't wait any longer to make this transition. The question is, which disruption do we want to face? A world ravaged by climate change, or a world where we take control of our future and build new, sustainable industries? He paused, scanning the room. The future isn't a given. We're not just waiting for the world to change. We're making it happen. But it requires commitment from every corner of society, governments, corporations, individuals. If we do nothing, it's not just the oil industry that will suffer, it's everyone. Wright opened his mouth to respond, but Musk raised a hand, signaling for him to hold off. I understand that change is hard, Musk continued. It's terrifying, but that's what it means to be human, to adapt, to evolve, and to find new ways of living. We've done it before, and we will do it again. The crowd, still uneasy, was beginning to shift. Musk's words, while forceful, carried a certain level of clarity. He wasn't backing down, but he wasn't denying the challenges ahead either. You can't solve a crisis by pretending it doesn't exist, Musk said. That's why we need to act now. The technology is here. The solutions are here. We just need the will to move forward. As Musk's speech came to a close, the room was filled with a charged silence. Many of the delegates who had initially been skeptical were now rethinking their positions. Even the skeptics, like Wright, seemed momentarily subdued by Musk's directness. But then, something unexpected happened. Isabella Ramirez, the young activist from Brazil, took the stage. She was part of a new generation that was no longer willing to sit back and wait for change. They were demanding it. Mr. Wright, she began, her voice steady and powerful. You speak of the economy, you speak of job losses. But what about the children? What about the families who have lost their homes to floods? What about the farmers whose crops are withering in the drought? What about the people who can't breathe because the air is thick with smoke from wildfires? The room grew still as Isabella's words hit home. We don't have time to wait for you to figure it out. We don't have time for more debates about whether or not climate change is real. We don't have time for empty promises. People are dying while we talk, and we will not stand by and let that happen anymore. Isabella's words sent a jolt of energy through the crowd. The fight was no longer just about technology or policy, it was about lives. And that shifted the conversation entirely. Musk looked at Isabella, her passionate plea resonating deeply within him. For the first time in the summit, he realized that the fight he was leading was more than just a battle of policies and ideas. It was a fight for the future of humanity. The tension in the room was palpable, but in that moment, Musk knew they were at a crossroads. Would the world choose to stand still and continue down the path of destruction, or would it choose to act and embrace a new future? One built on sustainability, innovation, and collaboration. In the next few moments, the summit began to transform from a place of conflict into a platform for real change. Governments began offering new commitments. Corporate leaders, though reluctant, began acknowledging the need for transition. And the voices of young activists like Isabella were no longer just an afterthought. They were shaping the future. Musk, in the center of it all, stood tall. This was only the beginning. The tipping point had arrived. Now, it was time for action. The Paris summit had concluded, but the world was far from settled. The discussions, debates, and fiery speeches had sparked a new sense of urgency, but the hard work was only just beginning. The transition Musk had envisioned was not going to be smooth. It would require sacrifice, innovation, and, most importantly, action. In the aftermath of the summit, the global media was abuzz with reactions. Some outlets hailed Musk as a visionary, a modern-day hero who had turned the tide on climate change with his bold vision. Others, however, painted him as a dangerous radical, a man too committed to his own ideals to understand the complexities of the real world. But one thing was undeniable. The conversation about sustainability was no longer a niche issue. It had become the defining conversation of the decade. Back at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, Musk was fully immersed in the next phase of the initiative. The GSA had gained significant ground, but now it needed to move from theory to practice. Global leadership was on his side, but governments were still hesitant to implement the sweeping changes Musk proposed. The true battle, Musk realized, was going to be fought on the front lines, at the intersections of politics, business, and grassroots activism. Musk had already secured a series of deals with European and Asian nations that would accelerate the development of electric grids powered by renewable sources. However, back in the United States, the battle raged on. While progressive states like California and New York had embraced the Green New Deal, conservative states were digging their heels in. With upcoming elections looming, politicians were scrambling to appease both their environmentalist constituents and their corporate backers. One of Musk's fiercest political adversaries, Senator Greg Harlow from Texas, had launched an all-out campaign to oppose the Green New Deal. Harlow, a staunch defender of the oil and gas industry, warned that pushing for a carbon-neutral future would cost America millions of jobs. The future Musk proposes, Harlow said at a rally, would cripple industries that millions of Americans depend on. This isn't just a debate about the environment, it's about survival. The senator's comments were echoed by others in the Senate, and the divide between progressive and conservative states deepened. In the coming weeks, Harlow would lead a group of lawmakers who sought to block Musk's policies through legal and political means. They saw the transition to green energy as an existential threat to their power and influence. Despite the mounting pressure, Musk remained resolute. If the world was going to change, it needed to take bold risks, push the boundaries of innovation, and leverage every tool at its disposal. So he turned to one of his other ventures, Neuralink. For years, Musk had been exploring the possibilities of merging human intelligence with artificial intelligence. Neuralink's brain-computer interface, BCI, was still in its early stages, but Musk saw a clear opportunity to use this technology to solve the problems that were hindering the transition to a sustainable future. Imagine a world where people didn't just rely on data, they could feel it. Where the human mind could directly interface with climate models, renewable energy systems, and environmental sensors, making real-time adjustments. The possibilities were endless. Neuralink could revolutionize the way the world approached sustainability by providing instant feedback and intelligent decision-making at a scale never before possible. Musk's idea was ambitious. Integrate Neuralink's brain-computer interface with the GSA's vast network of sensors and AI systems to create a real-time global environmental dashboard. By connecting the world's most important sustainability data, everything from atmospheric CO2 levels to energy grid health, directly into people's minds, the system would help decision-makers act with unprecedented efficiency and speed. To Musk, this was the next frontier of sustainability, making environmental stewardship not just a policy decision, but an instinct. It would be the ultimate tool in rallying people to the cause, making them feel as connected to the environment as they did to their own bodies. But even as Musk pressed forward with new innovations, the political winds continued to shift. The election cycle in the United States had reached a fever pitch, and Harlow's anti-Green New Deal campaign was gaining traction among voters in the oil-dependent states. Musk knew he had to do more than just push technological solutions. He needed to unite the world behind his cause, and that meant making his vision not just an environmental issue, but a human issue. At a press conference, Musk addressed the nation in a way he never had before. Not as the CEO of a tech company or the architect of a green revolution, but as a father and a leader who believed in the potential of humanity. "We face a choice," Musk said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "We can keep fighting each other over the future of this planet, or we can work together to build something better. We have a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to our children. We can create an economy that's powered by clean energy, that's driven by innovation, that's focused on sustaining life, not destroying it." His words struck a chord. The room fell silent as people realized that Musk wasn't asking for a sacrifice. He was asking for an opportunity to build a future where humanity could thrive, where children could grow up in a world that wasn't plagued by environmental collapse. While Musk was working to bridge the gap between politicians and corporations, Isabella Ramirez, the passionate climate activist from Brazil, was organizing on the ground. Her movement, Generation Green, was now a global force. Young people from all corners of the world were mobilizing, organizing protests, staging sit-ins, and using social media to demand action on climate change. But Isabella knew that her role was not just to protest. It was to make real change. She believed that young people had the power to reshape the world's economy and its environmental policies, if they could unite. "What we need," Isabella told a crowd in Sao Paulo, "is not just activism. We need to create solutions. We need to be part of the global conversation, not just protesting in the streets, but sitting at the table where decisions are made. She began working closely with the GSA to bring youth leaders into the fold, forming a new arm of the initiative called Youth for Sustainability. Their goal was to push forward the idea that the next generation wouldn't just inherit the Earth, they would help shape it. Musk saw the growing influence of Isabella and the youth movement as a critical component of his vision. Young people weren't just passive participants in the fight for sustainability. They were active, vocal advocates for change, and their involvement could push the GSA into areas that older generations might not yet see as possible. Musk knew that in order for the transition to truly succeed, the world had to work as a single, cohesive unit. The economic, political, and technological forces that had once driven humanity to the brink of destruction needed to be reimagined as allies in the global effort to save the planet. In a historic meeting in Tokyo, Musk brought together world leaders, corporate CEOs, and grassroots activists, those who had once been his fiercest critics, into one room. For hours, they discussed the future of the global economy and how it could be realigned to prioritize sustainability. It was the kind of conversation Musk had dreamed of for years, one where everyone at the table understood that the only way forward was by working together. "We are no longer divided by old interests," Musk said in his closing remarks. "We are united by a single, undeniable truth. We have a choice. We can choose to destroy the Earth, or we can choose to repair it. And together, we will choose to repair it." Musk's words resonated across the globe. The cooperation between the business community, governments, and activists was a rare sight. For the first time in history, the most powerful nations and corporations on Earth were aligning with the people who had been shouting for action for decades. But this was just the first step. The true challenge would be the implementation of these sweeping changes and the obstacles they would face along the way. One thing was certain: the world was changing. The tipping point had passed. It was now up to humanity to take the next steps and to build a sustainable future that would last for generations. The battle for the future of the planet had reached a critical juncture. The foundations had been laid, the speeches had been made, and the world's leaders had made their commitments. But when it came to action, the world faced a harsh reality. Good intentions alone would not save the planet. The transition Musk envisioned required a massive shift, economically, politically, and culturally, and that shift would be met with fierce resistance. In the United States, Senator Greg Harlow's campaign against the Green New Deal was gaining steam. His rhetoric had become more aggressive, framing Musk's proposals not as a vision for the future, but as an existential threat to American workers and industries. Harlow's allies in the oil, gas, and coal industries had mobilized, using their vast resources to fund political ads and sway public opinion. "We don't need Musk's Silicon Valley utopia," Harlow said in one of his rallies. "We need real American jobs. Jobs that support families. Jobs that fuel our economy. This green agenda will throw hard-working Americans out of their jobs and into poverty." Musk had known this pushback was coming, but it wasn't just about his plans. It was about the very structure of the global economy. The transition to renewable energy and sustainable industries wasn't just a new technology. It was a revolution in how the world operated. And revolutions were rarely bloodless. But Musk had something that his opponents didn't: the power of momentum. The world had woken up. People were demanding change, and the tide of public opinion was beginning to shift in favor of action. The question now was whether the momentum could survive the oncoming backlash. Musk knew that the only way to overcome the resistance from entrenched interests was to double down on the grassroots movement that had fueled the GSA's early success. He needed to harness the passion of young people, activists, and everyday citizens who had joined the fight for sustainability. He couldn't do this alone. Enter Generation Green, led by Isabella Ramirez, the young activist who had captured the world's attention. Isabella's influence had only grown since the Paris summit. What had started as a small movement in Brazil had blossomed into a global force. Millions of young people across the world were organizing, demanding not only a change in policy but a complete overhaul of the way society thought about progress. "Think about it," Isabella said during a televised interview, her voice resolute and full of conviction. "The future we've been promised is one where our children breathe clean air, drink clean water, and live in a world where their lives aren't defined by natural disasters. But that's not going to happen unless we make our voices heard. The planet needs us, and we need to fight for it. Her words struck a chord. The youth movement had become an undeniable force. Protests in the streets, sit-ins in government buildings, and social media campaigns were growing exponentially. While the political elites and industry giants worked behind closed doors to block progress, a growing army of activists was ensuring that the demand for action would not fade. While public pressure was mounting, the legislative battle in the U.S. became even more heated. The Green New Deal was now a central issue in the upcoming midterm elections, and the country had split into factions. On one side, politicians like Harlow worked tirelessly to stall progress, rallying support from the conservative states where oil and gas were king. On the other side, Democrats, environmentalists, and progressive leaders saw the Green New Deal as the only viable solution to the planet's crises. In the Senate, a critical vote was scheduled on whether to approve a $2 trillion climate package that would fund clean energy projects, retrofitting of buildings, electric vehicle infrastructure, and the creation of thousands of green jobs. It was the most ambitious climate bill ever proposed, and it was clear that it would be a decisive moment in the battle between the old world and the new. But the vote wasn't going to be easy. Harlow's coalition had whipped up enough support to make the outcome uncertain. Musk and his allies, however, weren't backing down. A small group of influential CEOs, along with some unlikely allies from within the fossil fuel industry, had been meeting secretly to discuss how they could push for a rapid transition to renewable energy without destroying the industries they had spent decades building. One such CEO was Sarah Hinson, the head of Global Tech, one of the world's largest energy companies. While Global Tech had long been an oil and gas giant, Sarah had started to see the writing on the wall. She had grown disillusioned with the oil and gas lobby and had quietly been shifting Global Tech's resources toward renewable energy projects. She wasn't alone in this quiet rebellion. More and more industry leaders were beginning to see that the future wasn't in fossil fuels, but in sustainable, innovative technologies. "I know this is risky," Sarah said during a private meeting with Musk, "but I think we have to make the break. If we don't, we're going to lose everything. The future of the planet depends on it, and it's time to act." Sarah's words resonated with Musk. This wasn't just a fight about policy. It was about the very survival of entire industries, as well as the future of the human race. But as the Green New Deal struggled to gain momentum in the Senate, something unexpected happened. Max Jansen, the CEO of one of the largest coal companies in the U.S., publicly broke ranks with his peers. Max had been a long-time advocate for the coal industry, but like Sarah Hinson, he had come to understand that the old ways were not sustainable. He had watched the reports of flooded coal mines, the rising cost of disaster recovery, and the social unrest caused by environmental damage. He saw how the traditional energy industry was struggling to adapt to a changing world, and he realized that holding on to the past would only lead to collapse. In an exclusive interview on CNN, Max made a shocking announcement. His company was transitioning away from coal and into green energy. "This isn't just about economics. This is about survival. We need to change how we produce energy, and that means making a break from fossil fuels." The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. Max's decision was seen as a betrayal by his fellow coal barons, but it was also seen as a lifeline by those who had been pushing for change. His move was a powerful signal that even the most entrenched industries were beginning to recognize the need for transformation. Musk wasted no time. He reached out to Max, offering his support and inviting him to join the GSA. "We're all in this together," Musk said in a public statement. "If coal can make the shift, so can every other industry. It's time for the world to come together, not just to fight for the future, but to create it." Max's decision was a huge victory for Musk and a critical turning point in the fight for action. The message was clear. Sustainability was no longer just an ideal. It was becoming the foundation for future success. And for the first time, industries that had once resisted change were now leading the charge. As the legislative battle raged on, Musk found himself at the center of a powerful coalition of unlikely allies. Industry leaders, grassroots activists, progressive politicians, and even former opponents like Max Jansen were all coming together to push for a single cause, a sustainable future. But with that alliance came a new set of challenges. There were no easy solutions. The transition would take time. It would be messy, and there would be setbacks. But for the first time, the world was beginning to see that the fight for a sustainable future was not just a political battle. It was a fight for the survival of humanity itself. At a press conference announcing a new international renewable energy summit, Musk summed it up perfectly. This is just the beginning. The real work is ahead of us. But we've reached the tipping point. The world has made its decision, and we are going to fight for a future where humanity can thrive and the planet can heal. The stage was set. The world had reached a tipping point, and the battle for a sustainable future had become a high-stakes race against time. With the deadline for passing the Green New Deal fast approaching, the final push was underway. Musk's coalition was strong, but the opposition was fierce, and every move they made was crucial. It was the morning of the decisive vote in the U.S. Senate. The Green Energy Bill, a $2 trillion initiative to radically overhaul the American economy by investing in clean energy, sustainable infrastructure, and green jobs, was about to be debated. The future of the planet was at stake. If the bill passed, it would accelerate the transition to a low-carbon economy and set the tone for global climate policy for years to come. If it failed, it would be a devastating setback, not just for the United States, but for the world. Musk stood in the hallway of the Senate, his eyes fixed on the door to the chambers. He had never felt the weight of the moment more acutely. Behind him, a team of advisors and supporters waited with bated breath. His heart raced with anticipation, but there was no room for doubt. This was the moment. Standing next to him was Isabella Ramirez. The young climate activist had become the face of Generation Green, and her influence had only grown. She had just finished speaking to a crowd of over 1 million protesters in Washington, demanding action. Her words had become a rallying cry for a new generation of leaders, but she knew the fight wasn't over. "We've come so far," Isabella said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "But this is it, Elon. This is the make-or-break moment. If we don't get this through, everything we've done so far could be undone." Musk nodded, his mind working through the thousands of possible outcomes. The vote could go either way, but he wasn't going to leave anything to chance. In the past few weeks, he had pulled every string he could, speaking with politicians, CEOs, and world leaders, doing everything in his power to secure the vote. But now, it was out of his hands. As the session began, it was clear that the Senate was deeply divided. On one side stood the progressives, those who saw the Green New Deal as the most critical legislation of the century. On the other, the conservatives, led by Senator Harlow, were ready to fight tooth and nail to prevent the bill's passage. Harlow's campaign against the Green New Deal had reached fever pitch, and his opposition had become more organized and vocal. Senator Harlow took the floor first, his voice booming as he addressed the Senate. "Let me be clear," Harlow said. "This bill is a Trojan horse. It's not about saving the planet. It's about tearing down the industries that have powered our nation for over a century. If this bill passes, we're not saving the world. We're condemning millions of American workers to poverty. This bill is a job killer. It's a disaster for our economy, and we will fight it with everything we have." His words were met with applause from his supporters, and for a moment, it seemed as though the vote would swing in favor of the status quo. The oil, gas, and coal industries had deep pockets, and their lobbying efforts had been relentless. But what Harlow didn't account for was the growing tide of public pressure. Musk knew that the only way to counter Harlow's narrative was to remind the world of the bigger picture, the existential crisis that lay ahead if action wasn't taken. In the past few days, he had joined Isabella and other activists on the streets of Washington, speaking directly to the people. The protests had swelled, and young people from every corner of the world were watching. Musk took the stage during a rally at the Capitol, his words amplified by the roar of the crowd. "This isn't just about a bill or a single initiative," Musk said, his voice rising with passion. "This is about our future, about ensuring that our children and grandchildren can live on a planet that's capable of sustaining life. We are not asking for your vote. We are demanding it. We are demanding that the Senate listen to science, listen to the people, and vote for the future." The crowd erupted in cheers. Musk's presence on the streets of Washington had sent a clear message to lawmakers. The people were watching, and they were not going to be silent. Isabella stood beside him, her eyes fierce. "This is our fight," she said. We can't let them win. The future belongs to us, and we have the power to change it. The hours leading up to the vote were agonizing. Every minute felt like a lifetime. Inside the Senate, the debate raged on, with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle delivering impassioned speeches. But as the final vote neared, the tension in the room became palpable. Musk and Isabella sat together in a private viewing room, watching as the roll call began. One by one, senators stood to cast their votes. It was a slow, painful process, each vote a potential death knell for the Green New Deal. When Senator Sarah Hinson, the CEO of Global Tech, stepped up to vote, it was a moment of immense significance. Having publicly supported the Green New Deal, she had become one of Musk's most important allies. Her vote was symbolic of the broader shift in the business community. If she voted yes, it would send a powerful signal to the world. Her vote was a resounding yes. As the votes continued, it became clear that the bill was facing an uphill battle. The numbers were close, and Harlow's side was pushing hard. But then, something happened that no one could have predicted. Max Jansen, the CEO of the largest coal company in the United States, stood up. Jansen had made a bold decision in recent months, publicly abandoning the coal industry and aligning himself with Musk's vision for a green economy. Now, he was about to make history. "I vote yes," Jansen said, his voice clear and unwavering. The Senate chamber fell silent. Max Jansen's vote sent shockwaves through the political and business world. The man who had once been the face of the coal industry was now siding with the future. It was a game changer. Musk felt the weight of Jansen's decision reverberate through the room. If Jansen could take such a bold step, surely the rest of the world could follow. Finally, the last vote was cast. The chamber held its breath as the tally was read aloud. The Green New Deal had passed the Senate by a narrow margin. The bill would now move to the House of Representatives, but the victory in the Senate was a monumental achievement. The tide had turned. As the Senate erupted into applause, Musk allowed himself a rare moment of relief. Isabella's eyes were filled with tears of joy as she hugged him. The fight wasn't over, but this was the turning point. "This is just the beginning," Musk said, his voice filled with determination. "Now, we have to make it happen. The real work starts now." The passage of the Green New Deal in the Senate sent shockwaves across the globe. Media outlets from New York to Tokyo reported the news with a mix of awe and disbelief. The world's most powerful nation had taken a stand for the planet, and the rest of the world was watching closely. For Musk, the fight was far from over. The bill still had to pass through the House, and the opposition wasn't about to let up. But for the first time, it seemed like the world was finally ready to make the bold choices necessary to secure a future for humanity. The Green New Deal had passed the Senate, but that was just the beginning. Now, the bill faced its final, and perhaps most challenging, test in the House of Representatives. This was where the battle would be decided, and where all the alliances and efforts of the past months would either culminate in victory or be undone in defeat. The House was a far more chaotic environment than the Senate. It was divided, not just along party lines, but also by regional interests, political loyalties, and, of course, money. While the Senate had been deeply polarized, the House was a hotbed of factionalism, where powerful lobby groups, industry giants, and grassroots movements all clashed for influence. Musk had no illusions about the challenges ahead. He knew that for the Green New Deal to pass, it would require securing votes from both sides of the aisle. While the progressive wing was solidly behind the bill, there were still many moderate Democrats and conservative Republicans who would need to be persuaded, if not by logic, then by political pressure. The bill had passed the Senate by a narrow margin, but the House was a different beast altogether. There, the fight was about political survival. The stakes were incredibly high, not just for the future of the planet, but for the politicians themselves. Whoever voted for the Green New Deal would face a fierce backlash from the fossil fuel industries, their powerful lobbyists, and the voters in coal-dependent districts. Musk had spent the past week in Washington, meeting with key representatives, gathering support, and putting together a strategy for the final push. Isabella, the young activist who had risen to prominence as the face of Generation Green, was by his side, as always. Her influence had grown exponentially, and now, more than ever, she felt like the voice of a generation. "We can't let up now," Isabella said, her eyes locked on the Capitol building in front of them. This is where it all comes together. This is where we either win or lose it all. The stakes were higher than ever, but Musk knew that public pressure was the key. Over the past weeks, the protests had become a global movement. From Washington, D.C. to Berlin to Rio de Janeiro, people were taking to the streets in an unprecedented show of solidarity for climate action. The movement had reached every corner of the globe, and the House of Representatives could not ignore the growing chorus demanding change. "The people want this," Musk said, speaking to a room of advisors and strategists. "We've built momentum, and now it's about making sure they know what's at stake. The people have made their voices heard. Now, we need to make sure the representatives hear it too." To drive this point home, Musk organized a massive rally outside the Capitol. Tens of thousands of people from all walks of life gathered, waving signs and chanting slogans calling for climate action. Isabella spoke at the rally, her words resonating deeply with the crowd. "We are not just fighting for the planet," Isabella declared. "We're fighting for every child, for every family, for every person who will live in the world that we leave behind. The future is in our hands, and the time for action is now." The energy at the rally was electrifying. Musk, standing behind Isabella on the stage, could feel the pressure mounting. The political system was crumbling under the weight of public demand. The time for half measures was over. This was the moment when the future of the planet would be decided. But the battle wasn't just about rallies and speeches. In the backrooms of Congress, the lobbying efforts were intense. The fossil fuel industries weren't going down without a fight. Behind closed doors, their lobbyists were pulling every string, offering campaign contributions, and making veiled threats to those who considered voting for the Green New Deal. At the center of this lobbying campaign was Senator Greg Harlow, who had become a vocal critic of the Green New Deal in the Senate. Harlow knew that the fight wasn't over, and he was ready to use every tool at his disposal to block the bill in the House. "We can't let this bill pass," Harlow told a group of Republican representatives in a private meeting. "If we do, it's not just the oil industry that's done. It's everything we've worked for. These people want to destroy the American way of life, and we can't let them win." But Musk wasn't sitting idly by. He had a powerful ally in Sarah Hinson, the CEO of Global Tech, who had switched her company's focus to renewable energy. Hinson's support for the Green New Deal had been crucial in the Senate, and now she was using her influence to put pressure on wavering House members. "I know some of you are on the fence," Hinson said to a group of moderate Democrats, "but let me tell you this. The future is green. Every day you delay, we fall further behind. We've made the switch at Global Tech, and we're already seeing the benefits: jobs, innovation, and a future that doesn't depend on polluting our planet." The final vote in the House of Representatives was set for the following week. The tension in Washington, D.C. was palpable. Musk, Isabella, and their allies knew that they had made every effort to persuade the House, but the outcome was still uncertain. On the morning of the vote, Max Jansen, the former coal magnate, made a surprise visit to the Capitol. His decision to transition away from coal had been a major turning point in the debate, and now he was there to make a final statement of support. "This is about the future," Jansen said as he addressed a group of reporters. "It's not about keeping coal jobs alive. It's about creating millions of new green jobs that will power the next generation of Americans. I'm here to support this bill because it's the only path forward." Jansen's presence at the Capitol sent shockwaves through the political establishment. His support was a powerful symbol of the changing tide in the energy sector, and it gave Musk and his allies the momentum they needed to push forward. As the hour of the vote approached, the tension in the House reached a breaking point. The halls of Congress were filled with nervous energy as representatives filed into the chamber. The lobbyists, the media, and the protesters were all waiting for the final decision. Musk stood at the back of the room, his gaze fixed on the proceedings. Isabella was by his side, her hand on his arm. Neither of them spoke. The noise in the room grew louder, and then it was time. The vote was called. One by one, representatives cast their votes, and the tension was unbearable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Speaker of the House announced the result. The Green New Deal had passed the House of Representatives. The room erupted into applause. The hard work, the sleepless nights, and the endless negotiations had paid off. The bill would now move to the president's desk, where it would be signed into law. Isabella threw her arms around Musk, and for a moment, they just stood there, absorbing the enormity of the victory. The world had changed. A new chapter had begun. "We did it," Isabella whispered. Musk smiled, though his thoughts were already turning to the challenges ahead. The passage of the Green New Deal was just the first step. The real work, implementing the policies, ensuring that the promises were kept, and overcoming the global challenges that lay ahead, was only just beginning. "This is only the start," Musk said, his voice filled with resolve. "Now, we build. The real work starts now." The Green New Deal was now law. The ink had dried on the president's signature, and the world stood on the precipice of transformation. But while the passage of the bill was a monumental victory, the real work had only just begun. The ambitious goals of the Green New Deal, carbon neutrality by 2050, a massive overhaul of the energy infrastructure, and the creation of millions of new green jobs, would require a level of coordination, innovation, and political will never seen before. Musk knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But he also knew that this was the moment when history would be written. The transformation of global economies from fossil fuels to sustainable energy was no longer a far-off dream. It was now an urgent, pressing reality. And the world was watching. The first step in turning the Green New Deal into reality was tackling one of its most ambitious goals, the massive expansion of renewable energy infrastructure. The plan called for solar farms in every desert, wind turbines across vast stretches of the plains, and geothermal plants to harness the Earth's natural heat. The goal was nothing short of a complete transformation of the energy grid, one that would run on 100% renewable energy by 2050. Musk was at the forefront of this revolution. His companies, Tesla and SpaceX, had already pioneered innovations in clean energy and electric vehicles, but the Green New Deal required scaling up these technologies to an unimaginable level. "We need to move faster," Musk said to his team at Tesla, his voice full of determination. "We have the technology, but now it's time to build it out. This isn't just about selling cars anymore. It's about creating the infrastructure that will power the future. The world is depending on us." His engineers and scientists nodded in agreement. They knew the stakes were high. Every day that passed without significant progress would cost the world dearly. To achieve the scale of the Green New Deal's energy goals, Musk began working with governments, local municipalities, and private companies to build the infrastructure that would carry renewable energy to every corner of the globe. But as expected, the political and logistical hurdles were immense. Despite the hurdles at home, the global response was swift. The passage of the Green New Deal had become a rallying cry for countries around the world. From Europe to Asia to Africa, nations that had long struggled with how to address climate change were now finding a model for their own solutions. Germany, already a leader in renewable energy, pledged to double its investments in solar and wind energy. India committed to transforming its grid, with the help of solar power projects that would electrify its rural areas. Even China, the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases, began transitioning its economy to renewables, focusing on solar, wind, and electric vehicles. Musk had always believed that the future was interconnected, and now, it seemed that the world was starting to share that vision. "We can't do this alone," Musk said in an address to the United Nations. "But if we all work together, we can create a future where clean energy is not a luxury, but a universal right." The Green New Deal is not just an American initiative. It is a global movement. This is our chance to heal the planet. The United Nations Summit in New York was a defining moment. World leaders stood alongside Musk and Isabella, committing to the changes necessary to combat the climate crisis. The commitment was strong, but the work ahead would require a level of coordination that no one had ever attempted before. Not everyone was on board with the New World Order. The fossil fuel industries, which had spent decades shaping global energy policy, were not about to surrender their power without a fight. Senator Greg Harlow, still a powerful voice in the Senate, was leading the charge against the Green New Deal's implementation. "This bill might have passed, but the real fight has just begun," he warned. "We're talking about dismantling entire industries. We're talking about job losses. We're talking about economic collapse." Harlow's rhetoric was echoed by lobby groups and political action committees funded by the oil, gas, and coal industries. They began a new campaign of misinformation, warning the American public that the Green New Deal would bankrupt the country, ruin families, and destroy entire communities. Their attacks grew louder, and public opinion began to waver in some regions, particularly those dependent on fossil fuels. Musk was prepared for the resistance. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he had always believed that change required sacrifice, and sacrifice was the price of saving the planet. He took to social media, speaking directly to the public. "We can't afford to let fear and misinformation control the conversation," Musk said in a viral post. "This isn't about destroying jobs. It's about creating millions of new ones. We're building a future, not a graveyard." At the same time, Isabella ramped up her efforts on the ground. She spent weeks traveling the country, speaking to coal miners, oil workers, and farmers, showing them how the Green New Deal would create new opportunities in clean energy. Her message was simple, yet powerful. The future was green, and they were part of it. "I know change is scary," Isabella said to a crowd of coal miners in West Virginia. "But we can't keep digging in the past. The world is changing, and if we embrace that change, there are jobs, good jobs, in this new world. We need you. The Green New Deal will create new opportunities for all of us, not just the wealthy." As the Green New Deal began to take shape, another challenge emerged: the economic transformation required to fund the massive scale of the projects. The bill allocated trillions of dollars for renewable infrastructure, clean transportation, and green jobs. But how would it be financed? To answer this, Musk turned to his network of billionaire investors, philanthropists, and tech innovators. Musk himself had already committed a significant portion of his wealth to funding sustainable projects, but now, he needed others to step up. "We need a new kind of capitalism," Musk said in a series of meetings with some of the world's wealthiest individuals. "One that doesn't just chase profits, but invests in the future of humanity. If we build the infrastructure now, the returns will come, but the real payoff is saving the planet." A new wave of impact investing began to take hold. The rich and powerful, many of whom had been hesitant to support the Green New Deal in the past, now saw an opportunity to profit while doing good. Large-scale investments poured into solar power, electric vehicles, sustainable agriculture, and green construction. The transition to a green economy wasn't going to be easy, but it was happening. Tesla and SpaceX led the way, developing new technologies to store energy, launch solar satellites, and build the infrastructure needed to make the Green New Deal a reality. In the early years of the Green New Deal's implementation, the effects were visible. Solar farms stretched across the deserts of the Southwest, wind turbines dotted the plains of the Midwest, and electric vehicles filled the streets of American cities. The air was cleaner, and the world was on track to meet its carbon goals. But it wasn't just the environment that was changing. Job growth in the renewable energy sector surged, creating millions of new jobs in fields like clean energy engineering, sustainable agriculture, and green construction. People who had once worked in fossil fuel industries were being retrained and transitioned into new careers, and the economy was shifting towards sustainability. In one of his most memorable speeches, Musk addressed a crowd in Detroit, once the heart of the American auto industry, now transformed into a hub for electric vehicles. "This is the future," Musk said, standing in front of a massive factory producing electric cars. "We're not just building cars here, we're building a future. And that future is powered by clean energy, driven by innovation, and sustained by the hard work of people like you." As the Green New Deal began to reshape the world, it quickly became clear that the fight was far from over. While the momentum for a sustainable future had grown stronger with each passing day, forces determined to maintain the old status quo were still entrenched in every corner of the economy and politics. The true battle for sustainability was now unfolding, not in government chambers, but in boardrooms, factories, and streets. Despite the growing success of renewable energy projects and the sharp decline in carbon emissions, the global transition to a green economy was anything but smooth. The fossil fuel industries, the heart of economic empires for over a century, weren't going to fade quietly into history. Senator Greg Harlow and his allies in the Republican Party were working relentlessly to dismantle the Green New Deal, using every legislative trick in the book. They introduced new bills to block clean energy subsidies, strip regulations on coal and oil drilling, and undermine the renewable energy push at every turn. But it wasn't just in Washington. Across the U.S. and in other countries, Local lobbyists and business interests that had once thrived on coal, oil, and gas were putting pressure on politicians to roll back environmental protections. Musk knew this would happen. He had seen the writing on the wall. The fossil fuel industries had fought for decades to maintain their grip on the world economy, and they weren't about to let go without a fight. Their battle cry was simple: the Green New Deal would destroy jobs and tank the economy. They'll never stop, will they? Isabella asked one evening, as she and Musk sat in the quiet of his office, reviewing the latest reports from Washington. No, they won't, Musk replied, his voice firm. But we won't stop either. We have a responsibility to keep pushing forward. It's a battle for the future of humanity. As the political battle raged in Washington, another fight was unfolding in the streets. While millions of Americans had embraced the Green New Deal, many were still struggling with the rapid pace of change. For workers in the fossil fuel industries, miners in Appalachia, oil rig workers in Texas, and truckers across the country, the transition felt like a betrayal. These people had spent their entire lives in industries that had sustained their families for generations. The idea of leaving these jobs behind, especially when the Green New Deal had yet to fully prove its economic promises, was terrifying. There were protests, not just in Washington but in cities like Pittsburgh, Houston, and even parts of Detroit. Musk understood their fear. He had been part of the movement to create green jobs, but he knew that the transition wouldn't be easy for those who felt left behind. Still, he refused to let the backlash deter him. We need to show them what the future looks like, Musk said during a meeting with his senior advisors. They need to see the opportunity in green jobs. We can't let fear control this transition. That's when Isabella came up with an idea: a national green jobs tour. The concept was simple: take the Green New Deal directly to the communities most at risk of losing their livelihoods. Show them the new jobs being created in solar energy, electric vehicle manufacturing, and sustainable agriculture. Emphasize the potential for local economic growth, not just environmental benefits. With Musk's backing, Isabella organized a nationwide tour, visiting places like West Virginia, Wyoming, and Oklahoma, areas hit hardest by the decline of coal and oil jobs. She brought along workers who had already transitioned to green jobs, local leaders, and activists to talk about the opportunities in clean energy. The campaign, dubbed the Green Future Tour, became an immediate success. The first stop on the Green Future Tour was Charleston, West Virginia, a town synonymous with coal mining. As Isabella stepped off the bus, the sight of the old mining rigs in the distance was a stark reminder of the deep history the region had with the fossil fuel industry. Local miners, their faces weathered and worn by years of labor, gathered in the town square, skeptical but willing to listen. I know it's hard to imagine a world without coal, but here's the truth, Isabella told the crowd. We can't keep digging deeper into the earth, but we can build the future on the work of your hands. Solar farms, wind turbines, electric car manufacturing, those are the jobs of tomorrow. She pointed to a group of former coal miners who had now found work in renewable energy projects, installing solar panels, building wind farms, and even managing electric vehicle factories. We've been through tough times, but now we're working in something that will last, said Tommy Hawkins, a former coal miner who had transitioned to installing solar panels. The money's good, the work's steady, and I'm proud to know I'm helping save the planet. The tour was a revelation for many, and as Isabella traveled from town to town, the tide began to turn. The message was clear. The future of work in America wasn't in digging up the past. It was in building a sustainable future. As the Green Future Tour gained momentum, Musk's companies were also taking action. Tesla, which had already revolutionized the electric vehicle industry, was expanding rapidly. They were opening new factories in small towns across the country, bringing new jobs and investment to places that had been abandoned by the fossil fuel industry. SpaceX, too, was ramping up its solar satellite projects and focusing on green technologies for space exploration. Musk saw this not just as a business venture, but as part of a larger mission to push humanity towards sustainability on Earth and beyond. As his companies surged forward, other corporate giants began to take note. Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft, all of whom had made sustainability pledges, now threw their weight behind the Green New Deal. Amazon pledged to become carbon neutral by 2030, while Microsoft began funding large-scale sustainable farming and clean energy initiatives. Apple, already a leader in green technology, promised to ramp up efforts to eliminate all carbon emissions from its supply chain. With the Green New Deal in full swing, the next phase of the battle was a cultural one. While the Green Future Tour had gained momentum, there were still many who resisted. The cultural war between the old energy economy and the new green economy had become entrenched. Senator Harlow, now leading a new movement dubbed Freedom for the Future, was rallying conservatives and coal workers against the Green New Deal. His rhetoric painted the Green New Deal as an existential threat to the American way of life, claiming that it would destroy American jobs and turn the nation into a third-world country. But Musk and Isabella were determined to press on. The stakes were higher than ever. The green economy was beginning to thrive, but it would take continued pressure, innovation, and education to win over those who were still skeptical. The battle for sustainability was not an easy one, but the vision for the future remained clear. More and more, people were starting to see the tangible benefits of a world powered by clean energy. Fossil fuels were on the decline, but the green economy was on the rise. Musk knew that he couldn't change the world alone. He needed the next generation of thinkers, innovators, and leaders to rise up and help guide humanity toward a future where sustainability was no longer a choice, but a necessity. The country was at a crossroads. The fight for the Green New Deal had moved from the political arena to the streets, with fierce divisions emerging between those who embraced the new green economy and those who feared it would bring the collapse of their way of life. The push for sustainability had ignited a cultural war, and the nation found itself increasingly polarized. At one end of the spectrum, there were the visionaries, the climate advocates, the environmentalists, and the tech innovators, pushing for bold, sweeping changes to save the planet. On the other side, there were the traditionalists, the fossil fuel workers, conservative politicians, and industries that had built their wealth on the oil, gas, and coal sectors, who saw the Green New Deal as a threat to everything they had worked for. Musk knew the stakes had never been higher. The promise of a green future was tantalizing, but the road was fraught with resistance. The debate over the Green New Deal wasn't just about jobs or the environment anymore. It had become about identity. For many working-class Americans in coal towns, oil fields, and Rust Belt cities, the Green New Deal felt like an attack on their very identity. They had built their lives around industries that were now being called obsolete. The message from the Green New Deal campaign, "We need to move on from fossil fuels," felt like a betrayal. In rural communities, where the legacy of coal was intertwined with family histories and entire communities, the transition to green jobs seemed like an impossible leap. The fear of being left behind was palpable. On the other side of the divide, people who had embraced the Green New Deal argued that the future was already here. They saw the catastrophic effects of climate change, rising sea levels, deadly wildfires, and extreme weather events, and understood that the world could no longer afford to stay locked in the past. The division wasn't just between regions, it was generational too. Younger people, who had grown up witnessing the accelerating impacts of climate change, were the most vocal supporters of the Green New Deal. For them, the choice was clear: fight for the planet's future or let it slip away. As the cultural divide deepened, so did the political battles. Senator Greg Harlow was leading the charge against the Green New Deal in Congress, framing the legislation as a job killer and a socialist agenda. He and his allies introduced new bills to roll back regulations on fossil fuels, aiming to protect the interests of coal miners and oil workers. The conservative media machine picked up the baton, amplifying these messages of fear and opposition. One evening, as Musk sat in his office reviewing the latest developments, Isabella burst in with a look of frustration. "They're playing dirty, Elon." Isabella's voice was tight with anger. "Harlow and his allies are spreading lies, saying that the Green New Deal is going to cost millions of jobs and destroy the economy." Musk leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. The opposition had been expected, but the sheer scale of the misinformation campaign still shocked him. "We can't keep waiting for them to come around," Musk said, his voice calm but firm. "We need to show them, show everyone, that the future is green, and we're not turning back." They decided it was time to fight back, not just with words, but with action. Isabella and Musk knew that simply advancing the Green New Deal through Congress wouldn't be enough. They had to reach the people, the voters, the workers, the communities who felt threatened by the Green New Deal's promise of a new economy. They needed a new narrative, one that didn't just focus on the risks of climate change or the green economy, but on the hope and opportunity that a sustainable future could bring. Musk called for a national town hall tour, traveling to coal towns, oil fields, and Rust Belt cities to directly engage with the communities who were skeptical of the Green New Deal. It's not about telling them they're wrong, Musk explained to his team. It's about showing them that we can create a future where everyone has a place, whether they're working in renewable energy or agriculture, or even in space exploration. We need to meet them where they are. The Green Jobs Now tour was born. The first stop on the tour was Pineville, Kentucky, a small Appalachian town known for its coal mines. It was a community steeped in history, where generations of families had worked the mines. But Pineville was also struggling. The coal industry had been in decline for decades, and unemployment was rising. As Musk and Isabella arrived, they were greeted by a crowd of coal workers, many of them skeptical, some outright hostile. But Musk didn't back down. "I know it's hard to think about life beyond coal," Musk began. "But the world is changing, and I want to show you that there's an opportunity for you in that change. We're building a future, not just for the rich and the tech-savvy, but for working people like you. Green jobs are real jobs, and they can help rebuild communities like Pineville." He spoke directly to the crowd, addressing their concerns about losing jobs and livelihoods. He talked about the potential for solar panel installations, electric vehicle manufacturing, sustainable agriculture, and battery production, all of which were booming industries in need of skilled workers. One miner, David MacArthur, stood up. "I've been working coal my whole life, Elon. My daddy worked it, and his daddy too. You say you're going to build a future here for us. But what makes you think we can trust you?" Musk looked David straight in the eyes. "I know the transition is tough, David. I know you're worried about losing everything you've worked for. But I'm here to tell you that we're not asking you to just walk away from your job. We're going to create new jobs, new skills, and new opportunities. We're going to train you to work in the green economy, and we'll make sure it's done right." David didn't respond immediately, but the crowd's energy shifted. There was still skepticism, but for the first time, there was a sense of hope that had been absent for years. The tour moved on to West Virginia, Wyoming, and Texas, where similar conversations took place. It wasn't easy, but the message of hope was beginning to resonate. Musk and Isabella made it clear. The future was not something to fear but something to embrace. Despite the progress made on the tour, the political climate was growing more hostile. The opposition had begun to rally not just in Congress, but in state legislatures across the country. In West Virginia, Kentucky, and North Dakota, state governments passed laws designed to block renewable energy projects, effectively halting progress on key parts of the Green New Deal. Senator Harlow became more vocal, rallying his supporters with fiery speeches condemning the Green New Deal as a socialist scheme designed to punish working-class Americans and destroy the economy. At the same time, media outlets that had long been sympathetic to the fossil fuel industry amplified the message of fear. Their reports painted Musk and Isabella as elitist outsiders trying to impose their vision of a green future on hardworking Americans who simply wanted to keep their jobs. Musk wasn't deterred. "We can't stop now," he said. "The people who are scared need to hear us, more than ever. If we back down, we lose. If we stand firm, we win. And we will win." The battle for the future of the planet had come down to a final, decisive moment. The Green New Deal, once an ambitious dream, was now facing its greatest challenge. The forces of resistance had grown stronger, and the political and cultural divides had deepened. Musk and Isabella knew that this was the moment when everything would either fall into place or collapse. With every passing day, the stakes felt higher. Could they unite the country and overcome the growing backlash? Or would the forces of fossil fuel and fear tear apart the momentum for a sustainable future? The opposition was everywhere. In Washington, the Republican-controlled Senate was ramping up its efforts to undermine the Green New Deal. Senator Harlow had formed a coalition of conservative lawmakers who were pushing bills that would not only roll back environmental regulations, but also attack the very foundation of the Green New Deal: the shift away from fossil fuels. In West Virginia, Kentucky, and North Dakota, local governments were passing laws to block the construction of renewable energy projects, especially wind farms and solar plants. The message was clear. The Green New Deal was a threat to jobs, to tradition, and to the American way of life. The rhetoric had become more vicious. Anti-green advertisements flooded television screens, demonizing the Green New Deal as a socialist plot and a job killer. The attacks on Musk personally grew more intense. He was now being branded as out of touch, a Silicon Valley billionaire who didn't understand the struggles of everyday Americans. And yet, despite all the anger, something else was happening. The grassroots movement that Musk and Isabella had ignited was gaining strength. Young people, environmentalists, and progressive communities across the country were rallying together, pushing for change with newfound urgency. Musk's team decided that they could no longer wait for politicians to come around. They needed to take the fight directly to the people. This wasn't just about policy anymore. It was about public opinion. The Green New Deal was now a movement, and they would push it forward through the sheer force of public support. To do this, Musk, Isabella, and their team launched Operation Green Wave, a nationwide campaign aimed at rallying the country's largest voting bloc, young people, while also reaching out to workers and communities that felt abandoned by the transition to renewable energy. Isabella organized a massive rally in New York City, a symbolic Green Wave march where thousands of activists and citizens gathered to demonstrate their support for a sustainable future. The event was covered by every major news outlet, and as the cameras rolled, Musk took to the stage. This is about more than just policy. It's about our children's future. It's about the world we will leave behind. Today, we stand not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans who believe in something bigger than ourselves. We believe in a future where we live in harmony with the planet and with each other. This is our moment. We can no longer wait. The crowd erupted into applause, the energy electric. People who had once felt powerless now felt like they were part of something much bigger than themselves. The march wasn't just a protest, it was a movement for the future. As the rally in New York drew national attention, Isabella and Musk's team began drafting what would become a game-changing piece of legislation, the Green Jobs Act. The act had a simple, powerful message. Transitioning to a sustainable economy didn't have to mean sacrificing jobs or economic stability. In fact, it could create more jobs, better jobs, than the country had ever seen before. The Green Jobs Act proposed to 1. Invest heavily in clean energy industries, solar, wind, and electric vehicles, creating millions of new jobs in manufacturing, installation, and maintenance. 2. Launch retraining programs for workers in fossil fuel industries, helping them transition to new, green careers. 3. Offer tax incentives to businesses that adopted green technologies and sustainable practices. 4. Ensure a just transition for communities affected by the decline of traditional industries, with a focus on providing economic relief to coal and oil regions. It was an ambitious plan, but the message was clear. The Green New Deal wasn't just about fighting climate change. It was about building a stronger, fairer economy for everyone. The Green Jobs Act was ready to be debated in the Senate. The tension in Washington was palpable. On one side, Senator Harlow and his allies were prepared to launch their final assault on the Green New Deal. On the other side, Musk and Isabella had rallied a coalition of progressive senators, business leaders, and labor unions who were pushing hard for the bill. Senator Harlow took to the Senate floor, his voice booming as he spoke against the Green Jobs Act. This bill is nothing more than a government takeover of our economy. It will cost millions of American jobs, and it will cripple the industries that have powered our country for over a century. We cannot afford this kind of radical change. Musk and Isabella watched from the gallery. They knew the fight wasn't just about the Green Jobs Act. It was about winning hearts and minds. When it was Musk's turn to speak, he walked down to the Senate floor with a calm but resolute demeanor. "I've heard the arguments against this bill," Musk said, his voice steady. "I understand the fear of change, but I'm here to tell you that this bill isn't about destroying jobs. It's about creating new jobs, jobs that are just as important, if not more so, than the ones we've known. We have an opportunity to rebuild America's future, and I'm asking you to join us in doing that. We cannot turn our backs on the future." The room fell silent. For a moment, there was an air of suspense, as if everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The Senate vote was about to take place. The vote was closer than anyone had predicted, with some conservative senators swaying toward the Green Jobs Act, moved by the overwhelming public support and the promises of new opportunities for their own constituents. In the end, the bill passed by a narrow margin, 51 to 49. Musk stood up from his seat in the gallery, a rare smile crossing his face. Isabella stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "We did it," Isabella whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "We really did it." It wasn't a complete victory, there were still battles ahead, but this was a massive step forward. The Green Jobs Act wasn't just a piece of legislation. It was a victory for the future of America, for the planet, and for the millions of workers who had once feared they would be left behind. The passage of the Green Jobs Act triggered a wave of optimism. Corporate giants, who had been waiting for such a bill to pass, quickly pledged billions in new investments in clean energy. Tesla, SpaceX, and other Musk-led companies ramped up their green initiatives, opening new factories and training centers across the country. Workers from former coal mines, oil fields, and manufacturing plants began to see the reality of the green economy. Training programs were launched, and communities that had once felt abandoned were now bustling with the promise of new jobs. Across the nation, it was clear that the battle wasn't over, but a new hope had been ignited. The fight for a sustainable future was far from finished, but one thing was certain. The Green New Deal had crossed the point of no return. The momentum was unstoppable now. The passage of the Green Jobs Act had sent shockwaves across the nation. The promise of a new era, where sustainability and economic growth could go hand in hand, was now a reality. The momentum was undeniable. Communities once left behind by the decline of fossil fuel industries were beginning to see the first signs of revival. And in Washington, a sense of hope began to replace the pervasive anxiety that had characterized the political landscape for so long. But even as the seeds of a greener future were being sown, there were still powerful forces determined to derail the progress. Would the vision Musk and Isabella had fought for continue to unfold, or would the forces of resistance, rooted in old industries and outdated ideologies, rise up once again? With the Green Jobs Act now law, the country was experiencing a profound shift. Solar farms began to replace abandoned coal mines. Wind turbines dotted the skyline of once industrialized regions. And as electric vehicles became more affordable, communities that had relied on gas-guzzling trucks and cars were now transitioning to electric alternatives. The green economy was no longer a distant dream. It was happening right now. The ripple effect was spreading as cities, states, and even corporations got on board with the vision Musk had laid out. From California's sprawling tech hubs to Rust Belt towns in Ohio, new businesses were opening, creating jobs in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and green technology. Musk's companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink, led the charge. Tesla's new battery factories were opening in the heart of America's former coal country, providing jobs for former miners who were being retrained to work with cutting-edge technology. At SpaceX, engineers were working on building a sustainable space economy, using green energy to fuel space missions. Meanwhile, Neuralink focused on enhancing human potential by developing brain-machine interfaces that would eventually help in improving cognitive skills for the next generation of workers. Musk had long envisioned the dual revolution, both technological and environmental, and now his vision was being realized. It was the perfect marriage of the two, a future where humanity could thrive on Earth and beyond. However, not everyone was thrilled with these rapid changes. Senator Harlow and his coalition of conservative lawmakers didn't give up easily. While the Green Jobs Act was a victory, Harlow had warned that it wasn't the endgame. Now that the act was law, the real fight was just beginning. Harlow's rhetoric was more aggressive than ever. He framed the green economy as an elitist conspiracy designed to destroy the backbone of America. In a fiery speech before Congress, he said, "This is not just about jobs. This is about America's soul. The Green New Deal is the biggest transfer of power and wealth in American history. And it's happening right under our noses. We cannot let these billionaires hijack our future." His words resonated with a certain segment of the population, especially those who had seen their way of life threatened by the rise of automation, green energy, and social change. The backlash was mounting. The media, still largely divided, continued to stoke fears about the Green New Deal's potential to harm traditional industries. A new wave of misinformation campaigns flooded social media platforms, claiming that the Green New Deal had caused mass job losses in energy sectors and that the renewable energy industry was an unreliable, unstable market. But Musk and Isabella knew that they couldn't afford to get sidetracked by these attacks. The Green Jobs Act had already started showing results. It was time to double down on the success and prove that the new economy was not just sustainable, it was robust. Isabella led a new initiative called the Green Future Fund, a national effort to connect the dots between the renewable energy economy and local communities. The goal was simple: show people that the green economy wasn't just something happening on the coasts or in big cities. It was about real people and real communities. To showcase this, Isabella organized a nationwide Green Future Tour, where she traveled to key battleground states and engaged directly with the workers who had benefited from the Green Jobs Act. From coal miners in West Virginia to farmers in the Midwest, Isabella listened to their stories of people who had feared for their jobs, only to find new opportunities in solar energy, electric vehicle production, and sustainable agriculture. At each stop on the tour, Isabella brought together workers, activists, and local leaders to discuss how the transition to green jobs was transforming their lives. In places like Cleveland, once devastated by the decline of manufacturing, new solar panel factories were opening. In Appalachia, former coal miners were training to become solar panel installers. In Nebraska, farmers were learning how to use renewable energy to power their equipment. One evening in Pineville, Kentucky, Isabella sat down with David MacArthur, the coal miner who had initially challenged Musk's vision back in the early days of the Green New Deal. David had recently completed a retraining program and was now managing a local solar farm. "I never thought I'd see the day," David said, smiling as he looked out at the rows of solar panels stretching across the hillside. "But here we are. I've got a good job now, one I can be proud of. And I'm helping my community, too. It's not the same as working the mines, but it's something better." It was moments like these that strengthened their resolve. The Green New Deal wasn't just a piece of legislation anymore. It was a cultural shift. People weren't just adapting to the future. They were building it. While the Green Jobs Act was taking root on Earth, Musk had never forgotten his other goal: to make humanity a multiplanetary species. The transition to renewable energy was just one part of his grand vision. The other was space exploration, specifically Mars colonization. In the wake of the Green New Deal's success, Musk turned his focus to SpaceX's next major goal: a self-sustaining colony on Mars. SpaceX had already achieved groundbreaking milestones, but the task of colonizing Mars was still monumental. It would require new technologies, new ways of thinking, and a global effort to ensure that humanity could survive and thrive on another planet. For Musk, the Green New Deal and space exploration were intrinsically linked. The same technologies that would power electric cars, solar panels, and wind turbines could also power Mars colonies. The sustainable technologies that were transforming Earth's future were the same ones that would enable humans to survive on Mars. He saw this as the ultimate proof of concept. If humanity could build a green, sustainable economy on Earth, then it was only natural that the next frontier would be the same. In a speech at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, Musk addressed his employees. "The future is green, not just for Earth, but for the stars. If we can transition to a fully sustainable society here on Earth, we can do the same on Mars." The Green New Deal is just the beginning. Our goal is to make humanity an interplanetary species, and to do it in a way that doesn't harm the environment but works with it. We are building the future right now, and that future is limitless. His words sparked excitement, not only among his team but also among the millions who followed his every move. The promise of a sustainable future on Earth and beyond was now a shared mission. Musk's dual vision, of both a green Earth and an interplanetary species, was becoming clearer than ever. But with all this progress, the forces of resistance hadn't given up. As Musk's vision for the future took shape, his critics were ramping up their attacks. In particular, Senator Harlow was determined to stop Musk from achieving his larger ambitions. "We've won the battle on Earth, but we won't let him take us to Mars," Harlow declared in a fiery speech in the Senate. "This is just the first step toward a future controlled by billionaires who think they know better than the people. We will not let them hijack our future on Earth or in space." Harlow's attacks were growing louder, more intense, and more personal. But Musk knew that these were just the final throes of a dying resistance. The people were speaking up, the jobs were being created, and the planet was beginning to heal. In the face of adversity, Musk remained confident. The battle for the future wasn't over, but the momentum was on his side. The year was 2035. A decade had passed since the monumental passage of the Green Jobs Act, and the future Musk and Isabella had fought for was no longer just a possibility, it was a reality. The world had undergone a transformation so profound that it was hard to remember what the world had looked like before. The green economy was thriving. Nations had rallied together to solve the climate crisis, using renewable energy, clean technology, and sustainable practices to rebuild ecosystems and communities that had once seemed beyond saving. And in the background, the seeds of something even greater had begun to take root: humanity's journey to the stars. The world was unrecognizable from its past. Massive solar farms stretched across the plains of the Midwest, while towering wind turbines dotted the skyline of coastal cities. The air was cleaner, and the oceans were healing as carbon emissions had plummeted to nearly zero. Electric vehicles were no longer a novelty. They were the standard. Streets and cities from Los Angeles to Paris were filled with electric cars, buses, and even electric trucks that had replaced their polluting counterparts. The idea of green cities, where buildings were designed to be energy efficient and self-sustaining, had become a global movement. Urban areas once burdened by pollution and congestion were now green havens, with rooftop gardens, urban farms, and public transportation systems powered by clean energy. Communities that had been ravaged by the decline of old industries were thriving, thanks to the opportunities created by the Green Jobs Act. Workers who had once feared for their futures now had stable, well-paying jobs in renewable energy, electric vehicle manufacturing, and sustainable agriculture. And then there was the infrastructure that had grown up around Musk's other great ambition: space colonization. The Mars colony was no longer a distant dream. It was a fully operational, self-sustaining human settlement. People now lived and worked on Mars, and the infrastructure to support them was powered by the same green technologies that had revived Earth. SpaceX had revolutionized space travel, making it possible for humans to leave Earth and begin the process of colonizing other planets. Musk stood at the helm of a revolution that had begun with a simple idea: to create a future where humans lived in harmony with the planet. Now, the world had embraced this vision, and the ripple effect of his work had spread far beyond anything he had imagined. But it wasn't just about the technology, the clean energy, or even the colonization of Mars. What Musk had built was a philosophy, a new way of thinking about progress. A future where humanity didn't just use the Earth's resources without care, but worked with the planet to create a thriving, sustainable future. And that philosophy had spread far beyond the borders of the United States. It had taken root across the world. In a final speech, broadcast to millions of people around the world, Musk shared his thoughts. Today, we stand on the precipice of a new era. An era where the boundaries of possibility are no longer defined by the limitations of the past. A future where technology works for us, not against us. A future where we, as a species, no longer see ourselves as separate from the planet, but as part of a greater whole. The Green New Deal wasn't just a piece of legislation. It was the beginning of the end of a dark chapter in our history, a chapter where we blindly used the Earth's resources without thought. And today, we turn the page to a new story, one where we work together, with purpose, for the good of our planet and our future. The new dawn is here, and it's ours to shape. While Musk's brilliance and vision had led the charge, it was Isabella's tireless advocacy that had cemented the Green Jobs Act's success and pushed the movement forward. She had traveled to every corner of the country, spoke to every community, and worked tirelessly to ensure that the benefits of a green economy were felt by everyone, especially those who had the most to lose in the transition. Now, as the world had begun to heal, Isabella's role shifted from political strategist to a global ambassador for sustainability. She worked with governments, businesses, and grassroots organizations to ensure that the progress made was sustained and expanded. Her work wasn't just about pushing policy anymore. It was about nurturing a global culture of sustainability. The Green Jobs Act had achieved what many thought impossible. It had not only addressed the immediate climate crisis, but it had also provided the blueprint for global cooperation in the face of overwhelming challenges. Isabella knew the work wasn't finished, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. She had helped build a world where the future wasn't just something to survive, but something to embrace. While the majority of the world had embraced this new era, there were still pockets of resistance. Senator Harlow, now a figure of the past, had retired from politics after his failed attempts to block the Green New Deal. His attempts to divide the nation had ultimately failed, and as his final speech was replayed across the news, many Americans looked back with a sense of disbelief at how far the country had come. Those who had fought against the Green New Deal, seeing their political power evaporate, were now facing the reality of an inevitable transformation. The old industries they had championed were in decline, and the people they had once promised would benefit from them were now thriving in a new, sustainable world. There was no longer room for denial or regression. The Green New Deal had prevailed, not just because of its policy, but because of the will of the people. The global community, united by shared challenges and aspirations, began to tackle the next frontier, global sustainability. The Paris Climate Agreement was no longer a distant aspiration. It was a binding contract upheld by every nation. The World Bank, once focused on fossil fuel-driven development, now focused on sustainable infrastructure for all nations. Energy poverty was being eradicated as solar grids and wind energy systems were deployed in the developing world, bringing clean, affordable energy to remote villages. Global poverty had dropped to its lowest levels in history as nations committed to fair trade practices, sustainable farming, and green technology that could be scaled across borders. In every corner of the globe, people were waking up to the reality of a shared future where progress and sustainability went hand in hand. The lessons learned from the Green New Deal weren't just limited to the United States, they had become universal. As Earth's healing continued, attention turned to the next great leap, Mars. The first permanent human settlement on Mars had grown from a handful of astronauts to a thriving community of over 10,000 people living and working in biodome cities built from Martian materials. The colony was powered entirely by solar energy, and each new discovery brought the possibility of self-sufficiency closer. Musk's dream of multiplanetary life had become reality. Mars wasn't just a backup plan for humanity, it was becoming a second home. SpaceX's Starship launches were now a routine part of life, and soon, space tourism would allow people to visit the Red Planet. Mars had gone from a barren wasteland to a new frontier where humanity's future would unfold. But Musk knew that the success of Mars was inextricably tied to Earth's survival. The two worlds would grow together. Earth would teach Mars how to live sustainably, and Mars would provide humanity with the opportunity to stretch its wings beyond Earth. In his final speech on Earth, Musk stood before a global audience, surrounded by leaders from every corner of the globe. He had seen the future, both on Earth and on Mars, and he knew that the journey was just beginning. The future is not something we are waiting for. It is something we are creating. The world we live in today, the progress we've made, is not the end. It is the beginning of something much greater. This is our moment. The new dawn has arrived, and it is up to each of us to shape it. Together, we can create a future where humanity thrives, not just on Earth, but in the universe. The possibilities are endless. The future is ours. And with that, a new chapter began. One where the future wasn't just about surviving but about thriving. In the new world they had all built together, the dawn of a new era had arrived, and humanity was ready for it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?